ставши на коліно, своє полкове знамено, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі. Відвагу нашу нашій волі, загиблих друзів імена, читаю на шовковім полі я полкового знамена, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі. Усе, що разом пережито, в походах вистраждано все. Я знаю, інші гордовито прапороносець
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Future
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1017 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And today we see that Russia and Iran are abandoning Assad in Syria, leaving him completely helpless. And also, the Russian forces are going back to mainland Russia, and that is very good news indeed. And also, it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've been hearing some major and wildly crazy news today that the Bashar al-Assad regime is witnessing its very last hours at this moment today, as we are hearing that coalition forces of rebel forces that are anti-Assad regime are rapidly advancing through every single area of the Syrian Arab Republic at this moment and are finally bringing the Assad regime and the Syrian civil war, a 12-year-long war mired with atrocities that were committed by the Russian Federation and the Bashar al-Assad regime, is now finally coming to an end. Russian Federation forces are currently leaving the Latakia air base and traveling to Tartus to leave for their final time out of the area of Syria. The strategic implications for the Russian Federation are dire, but regardless how this turns out afterwards, this has been a major victory so far for the Western world, as regardless of which faction ends up controlling Syria, a major key element to Russian control or an attempt at some control in the Middle East and some exertion of power over Western Africa will most likely be coming to a close with the fall of Syria, most likely within the next few days. The news is absolutely shocking, and I do have to let y'all know that we are mostly going to be covering the Syrian civil war tonight because it is, quite honestly, the largest event that is going on in the world right now. A 12-year-long war that has been mired in heavy battles, massive controversies, and not only that, questionable factions that have risen and fallen is finally going to be coming to an end literally before our very eyes. Meanwhile, outside of Syria, we have been able to hear that Bashar al-Assad al-Assad has already fled the country and is currently inside of Iran at this moment, while we are hearing that his family is still inside of the Russian Federation, apparently at the Four Seasons Hotel. This is changing a lot of the information that we had, at least in the preliminary phases, as we are now seeing that Bashar al-Assad actually was in Syria up until this day today, a few hours ago after I made the video that was put out in the middle of the day. We were also able to hear some major news from the other side of the world that President Yoon Suk-yeol will be making a televised announcement to the citizens of the Republic of Korea very soon about the declaration of martial law that was conducted several days ago. So far, at least according to our information, we have not seen a publication of a statement yet by Yoon or anyone else in the presidential cabinet, but nevertheless, it does seem as though we are still waiting for that statement. Meanwhile, in the Russian Federation, it appears that something has happened at Maikop. We believe that there may have been some sort of Ukrainian attack in this area, although the exact information is uncertain, and also the exact amount of damage is also hard to assess at this moment as well. Meanwhile, the Russian Federation also appears to have lost so much ability to exert influence or control over the Russian-aligned world that they have resorted not to actually overthrowing the opposition government that just took over West Abkhazia in a coup. They've actually ended up resorting to sanctioning them and stopping them from shipping tangerines into the Russian Federation as a form of punishment. Since the Russian Federation is so strapped on manpower, they cannot conduct armed intervention in Abkhazia at the moment to overthrow the government that just was formed about a week ago. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, we have been hearing that the Russian Federation has been continuing to attempt its frontline advances, although all of those have gone fairly poorly, and Russian losses are still retaining a very high number on a day-to-day basis. Nevertheless, today is a very shocking day of news, and it's actually an insane one, because we have never seen a country topple on the news like Syria is toppling at the moment. But moving...
Also, hasn't al-Assad been there since like 2000? This has been like 25-something years that he's been there, to my knowledge. And this is the first time he's actually gotten ousted. There's been many attempts, but this is the first successful one in 2025. So it's been a long time coming, but he's finally out.
It is the first time that this has ever happened in Syrian history. It is actually a very wild thing. It's crazy, actually. And I want to make sure to get y'all down in here and get y'all the news on what's been going on as well. I do also have to say this as a kind of an addendum. The map was updated to show the proper front lines that are existing at the moment inside of Syria. So while I talk about the general situation with y'all, I'm going to be readjusting that because for some reason the map reset, unless it was in the southern area where I did redraw it, and it appears to have retained the information. But in the area around the Ottomp garrison, as well as the SDF front lines, those have changed a great deal recently, and for some reason, the map, when I changed it, never saved the inputs, and therefore it largely reverted back to what it was. So I'm going to be telling y'all what's been going on, at least over the past 24 hours, while I actually show y'all as well on the map. The Free Syrian Army, or the Syrian Free Army, whichever way you want to call it, the FSA or the SFA, has rapidly advanced out of the area of the Ottomp garrison, and is currently closing in on the town of Palmyra, one of the only somewhat sizable settlements within the area of the Syrian desert at this point. It appears that the Free Syrian Army is practically moving forward unopposed, and this would be their general front line, at least at the moment from what we're hearing on from sources on the ground. Although we've had no video and picture evidence to actually corroborate those advances, we've been getting the information from credible enough sources, so we'll be reporting their frontline advance as such. Meanwhile, in the area around al-Raqqa, which is just on the northern side of the Euphrates River, we have been able to hear that there has been a complete general retreat of Syrian Arab Army forces from the area of the Euphrates River as they are rapidly racing across the desert so that way they don't end up getting encircled by the Free Syrian Army. And not only that, it also appears that they are incredibly concerned of the Syrian Democratic Forces and their potential advances as well. And therefore, they are actually retreating at a pace so fast, the Syrian Democratic Forces are not able to keep up. They are retreating quicker than the Syrian army, the Syrian Democratic Forces, can advance. And so for this reason, there's actually a pretty sizable no man's land in Syria at this time, in between the Syrian Arab Army and the SDF. From what we understand, this is the general front line right now that the Syrian Arab Army has at the moment, but once again, I want to make it very clear that the Syrian Arab Army is continuing to retreat down the M20 highway and back towards Damascus. We don't really know what purpose that is for, because they are literally giving up the entirety of their desert holdings buildings and giving up the major defensive element of the Euphrates, but nevertheless, it appears that some decision has been made either by the commanders on the ground to run for their lives and possibly spare themselves from a less than fortunate fate, or their general plan is by the Syrians to withdraw all of these forces to Homs to conduct a desperate last stand, although by the time these forces even make it to Homs, the Battle of Homs will largely be over. But we're going to be considering that the areas of no man's land are pretty much already in SDF control, considering the fact that the Syrian Arab army is never going to be returning to this area. So at the moment, this is actually a pretty close approximation to what Syria looks like right now. And once again, to go over the factions, the faction in green is the Syrian Free Army, or the Free Syrian Army, based out of the At-Tanf garrison in U.S. control. The areas in orange that are north of that are the ones under Syrian Democratic Forces control. The areas in light gray, north of that line, are the areas that are inside of the Syrian Salvation Government's control. And then everything that is not that is currently inside of the red line and south of that isn't in the green or the orange down here, is still a part of the Syrian Arab Republic, at least for now, from the last report that we got. But the front lines are changing so quickly, it's really hard to actually tell y'all exactly what's happening and how quickly the Syrian Arab Republic is beginning to shrink. So with that in mind, these are a very rough approximate at the moment, and take them with a grain of salt, because by the time you see another map on Twitter, if you're looking around on Twitter, this will probably have changed drastically by that point. But moving on into what has been happening today that we know about without a shadow of a doubt, we have been able to see that the rebels not only took Hama yesterday, but already prepared and advanced down the highway from Hama and past Rastan, where the bridge was actually destroyed by a Russian airstrike the other day, and we're now, earlier on in the day, in Talbasset, and we were able to get very clear evidence of that because video and picture evidence came out of them circling the roundabout and making their way on towards the actual city of Homs.
Man. Pulling around the soccer mom van just firing AKs.
Man, it's like Detroit. Was that a buhanka? No, that wasn't a buhanka. It's something very similar looking, though. That looked like one, didn't it?
It looked like one of those Japanese Kai trucks.
I don't know what it is, but this thing's got rims, dude. Look at that up there, man.
The
Dude.
back doesn't know. It's like the stock wheels in the back.
Stock wheels, dude, on the back, they're getting to work. On the front, they're pimping it out. You know what I mean? Like it's like a half and half kind of a thing. You see them continuing to pass by. Celebratory gunfire, all abound.
Oh, they brought the Cadillac. Look at that. The Escalade's been brought out for this one.
Oh, my Lord, dude. They brought out the Cadillac. That's crazy. That's legitimately
They're
crazy.
balling out here.
And then we got the Japanese mini trucks now bringing up the rear guard of this convoy. Celebratory gunfire continues. We also got another soccer mom minivan here.
You know, it's a tough day when these are the people taking your country over. Like it's a really rough day because it's like the Assad regime didn't have a really fine fighting force per se, but the fact that these guys rolling up in soccer mom vans are taking the country over, that's got to be embarrassing.
You know, it really has to be embarrassing. It has to be even more so embarrassing when you start to see that they were literally prepping outside the city, unopposed at this point. I want to make that fairly clear in this clip, to move into Homs. Now, I want to remind everyone, pretty much the entire Syrian Arab army at this point is either inside of Homs when this video was being made or just around it. So keep that in mind. They could have easily counterattacked the Syrian Salvation Government forces at any point, or the HSF as some people are calling them. They could have attacked them at any point, especially right now, because the entirety of the SSG's armed forces were on this highway, on the side of the road, not ready for action, not ready for any kind of combat, and were literally just sitting there and finally figuring out their plan for what they're going to be doing when they take Homs.
That is the jankiest looking armored truck I've ever seen.
Oh, it gets better. It gets way better. They have, I don't know what this is. It almost looks like a mix in between a Humvee and an M151 Mutt. I don't know what the hell it is, though, so no one asked me what that is. We can also see some more Toyota Hiluxes. You always have to have Toyota Hiluxes when conducting an overthrow of a government anywhere in North Africa or the Middle East. So we can see that here. We can also see that they put sandbags on top of the roof for added protection, although there is no armor slats on the windshield. I don't know what they're planning on getting attacked by, but I don't know what the sandbags are going to do. And they also have gush guns. And they also have another Toyota. Every single one of them is caked in this reddish-brown mud. We have figured out that that's apparently a deliberate thing that they do to try and camouflage the vehicles in the Syrian desert or the arid Syrian environment surrounding most of the cities, which is kind of smart, actually. Like, I actually thought that they were just covered in mud just because, but actually it appears that it's a deliberate strategy, as y'all will see later.
Oh, wow, that guy has a custom Toyota branded brush guard on the front. I've never seen that before.
That is pretty cool. You know, I've never noticed car mods, Matthew, and you brought that up, and now I'm like, wow, I have never seen that either. Like, that's actually probably like a rare, like, add-on for a Toyota, and this guy out there in the middle of Syria just has it. You know, he's probably like the talk of the town wherever he came from. They're like, you know, he has like the custom Toyota brush guard on the front of his truck, right? And they're like, what?
Absolutely.
But
and also, by the way, is that even a Hilux? I'm not sure what model of Toyota pickup that even is. It kind of looks like a Hilux, but also a mix of a Tacoma.
I don't know. I don't know what that thing is, and I have a feeling it's probably a Toyota thingamajig because most of the things in the Middle East are some sort of a thingamajig. Also, I have to point out because some people out there, there's been a bit of controversy around the SSG, the Syrian Salvation Government, and what are they? Are they a good group or are they a bad group? So I was able to find a little bit more information today about this, and just to let y'all know what kind of a group they are, because some people are saying, actually, no, they're the bringers of justice and peace and freedom. That right there is the flag of the Emirate of Afghanistan, aka the Taliban, flying off the side of this Toyota. So I think y'all can kind of get an idea. Ideologically, they're not really lining up with Western values all too much, just looking at that at face value. The other thing is that the leader of the SSG currently has a $10 million bounty on his head that was put on him by the FBI for anyone that could give them information about his whereabouts or actually turn him into the FBI. So at the moment, it appears that the SSG, of course, like we have been saying, is not that great of a group. We're not exactly rooting for these people. We're rooting for the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are an official ally of the United States, but these people are fairly questionable. They're about as questionable as the actual Assad regime that they're going to overthrow. Well, you see him passing by. He's oh my god, he's an antique. I've never seen one. Oh, I gotta pull this up for y'all. Recoilless rifle. Oh, please, come on.
A recoilless rifle, eh?
Hang on, I gotta go show y'all this. Y'all are not going to believe this. 1 second. Oh my god, I gotta find this thing. Dude, hang on. Oh my lord. I've gotta find it. Hang on. Let me pull up the Hontos. Oh, I've gotta find this thing. Oh, here they are. Okay, so here we go. Here it is. So these things, I've never even seen them in service in any force, any group, anywhere in the world. These things, this thing on this truck right here is an M40 recoilless rifle. We put this thing in service in the U.S. Army in 1955, and I believe it was retired around the end of the Vietnam War in the early 70s, if I'm remembering correctly, here for the U.S. It's still been in service in some militaries around the world. I believe the Philippines still has a few of these things. I have never seen an M40 recoilless rifle in the 21st century on anything. I don't know if they raided a museum, like, and I'm not even kidding about that, to get this thing, because I don't even think the Syrian Arab Republic ever even had access to these things, so I don't know where they got it from. That's actually wild that they have one of these things. I don't know where they get the ammo for it. It doesn't look like they have any real like ammo limber or anything like that for this recoilless. I have no clue about anything of this vehicle. Also, one other thing that I want to point out is I don't know what the front of this thing is either. It looks like a Franken vehicle. It looks like it may be made out of a Humvee and a couple of other different vehicles all cobbled together, and it somehow runs.
Also, they only have one side of the windshield up, too, so this one guy's getting bugs. And also, is he wearing a cowboy hat? Am I seeing that right?
He's a rhinestone cowboy, Matthew.
Man, he's a Yellowstone fellow.
Man. Oh man, you know what that means. Like, you know what that means. Also, I like how his side door is made out of chicken wire. I like that. I really appreciate that. Really getting the ventilation going in this thing. But there it
The
goes.
chickens in.
Also, by the way, someone asked what caliber is an M40. I believe it's 105. Yeah, it's a 105 millimeter recoilless rifle. So it's a pretty sizable caliber, actually. But then we got to see them over on the side of the street, chit-chatting, talking about what they're going to do when they get into Ohms. Also, hang on, hold up. We got to see. This will really let us know. Are these... Okay, this guy... I don't know what it is. I got to tell you all this. This is something that you can notice. Some people always say you could always tell the groups that were trained by the CIA back in the Middle East because they always had trigger safety where they would keep their finger off the trigger until they were ready to fire. I'm not going to lie. Apparently, sometime in between 2011 and now, everyone learned that that was the thing you were supposed to do because I never see anyone just keeping their finger on the trigger anymore when handling any firearms anywhere. Even the Syrian rebels, at least the SSG, who are poorly trained, we saw that the other day, along with the Syrian Arab Army, all of them have finally found out don't put your finger on the trigger all the time. So that's interesting to see. It took about 14 years for that to actually reach everyone in the area, that they finally got the memo, but it looks like they're finally doing that now. What is that? Is this like a Land Rover-ish sort of a thing, Matthew?
I was about to say it looks like maybe a Land Rover, but for some reason the grill is not like jiving exactly what I'm thinking, so I'm not really sure. It could be though.
I don't know. Also, I gotta give a shout out to Patchy the Pirate back here with the skull and crossbones on his beanie. I gotta appreciate him. He's out there.
That's the Adidas logo.
That's the Adidas logo?
Yeah, that's the old style Adidas logo.
Man, I couldn't even know, man. I thought that was literally like a skull and crossbones back there. We can also see the boonie hat right up here in full display. And also a boonie hat that has a brim so wide, I think that might classify as a sombrero, actually. But we can see that guy passing. We can now see a bus, a Hyundai bus, literally busing them into to the outskirts of Ohms for the battle that's now happening at this moment. They were absolutely goosing that bus. Look at this, man. They were bouncing around in that thing.
That's called. Also, by the way, the name of the bus is the County Deluxe. It's on the front of it. I've never heard of that anywhere in my life, but yes, they are riding in the County Deluxe. It looks like maybe a Hyundai, so I've definitely never heard of that.
Man, they drive up to Ohms to the remnants of the Syrian Arab Army, and they're like, "I heard you wanted a County Deluxe," or something like that, you know, and then they give it to him. It's like, what are these things? I want to know. There's so many of them.
They just put Toyota stickers on everything. Like seriously though, like they love Toyotas. Like the Toyota's like a fan favorite. Like they are like actually like brand ambassadors of Toyota. They buy the stickers like they're supporting like their favorite team or something. It's crazy.
It is crazy. You know, Matthew, it's kind of hitting me. These things look like they might be Toyota Land Cruisers, maybe, that have been heavily modified.
Yeah, it would have to be extremely heavily modified because that I can't tell just from the chassis if that's one. But considering they put Toyota stickers over it, it could be.
It might be, possibly, maybe. Also, we can now see the Toyotas that actually were camouflaged up with the tree limbs put all in them and then also caked in dirt, which lets us know that this was a camouflage technique that they were using to hide these vehicles from being destroyed by the Syrian Arab Army when they were a threat about 6 years ago. These guys really overdid it. They wanted to be Yellowstone National Park on a single Toyota. I gotta appreciate them for that one. Also, we have a makeshift MLRS right here. I've never seen one like this. Like, this is literally just tubes put in top of put on a frame. I don't even know how accurate that thing is. But there it goes, and that's the end of that clip, but still showing us the convoy as it started to move into Ohms, and we are now hearing that the Battle of Ohms has begun just a few hours ago, and rebel forces of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS forces have entered the northeastern neighborhoods in the city of Ohms, with heavy clashes being reported with a small contingent of pro-Assad forces remaining in the city. But we largely understand that this battle will not be lasting long, simply because we are also hearing that the city has practically been abandoned. It appears that that post post was deleted, but there was a rumor circling around earlier today that much like Hamas, Syrian Arab army forces had already largely left the city, and there was very few forces that remained in the entirety of the city of Homs to actually hold it down and attempt to defend it. We also got to see that the Russian Federation fired some of its last shots in anger of the entire conflict today from a Ka-52 on the very northern side of Homs as it was attempting to try and stop the convoy from moving in. And we can also see that, interestingly enough, the lessons learned in Ukraine have now been expanded to include Syria as well, as Ka-52s are never used in a direct fire role any longer. They are always used in an indirect fire support role now, tilting upwards and firing their rockets in an arc to make sure that the Ka-52 is never subjected to ground fire, possibly showing that the rebels have some form of air defense that we do not know about, most likely manpads, or that the Russians simply no longer consider the Ka-52 expendable, considering that they have lost so many in Ukraine, about half of the fleet, and so for this reason, they don't even want to risk losing another one in a place like Syria.
شايف شلون؟
We can now see it hitting the deck again and getting on out of there, most likely heading back towards Tartus, the port of Tartus. And that's the end of that clip right there. But moving on from that, the Battle of Homs is raging right now as we are live on air. We will not know the exact details of how the city fell, most likely until weeks from now. We don't even really know how Hama fell, to be entirely honest with y'all, or Aleppo. They fell so quickly, there was really no way to actually get the in-depth details of the battle, how both sides advanced, how both sides retreated, who was defeated, who won. We didn't get to get any of that info. We just got the major announcements. Aleppo fell, Hama fell, and we're most likely going to be getting here in the next few hours that Homs has fallen as well, and most likely will never return back to the Syrian Arab Republic. Meanwhile, the situation is getting pretty bad pretty much everywhere inside of Syria, as largely for the past week and a half or so, the SSG, the Syrian Salvation Government, has really been the only force inside of Syria that's actually been conducting any kind of offensive efforts. But now, as of today, we are clearly seeing that the Syrians are retreating en masse from every single direction, possibly out of fear of what the other factions like the SDF may be able to do to them, or also because of the fact that they no longer want to fight, or they've been ordered to try and fall back and either defend Damascus in a final last stand attempt, or to defend the city of Homs if they can make it in time. We already saw that the Syrian garrison at Deir ez-Zur, one of the major strong points along the Euphrates River, has completely abandoned the town today, and one of the columns was videotaped retreating further west and deeper into Syria towards the city of Damascus. Also, I don't know who's got the rap beat going on in the background as they're leaving, but I appreciate them for that. It really do be busting it down. But nevertheless, we also then heard that apparently the Syrian Democratic Forces have also made some sort of a peace pact or a defensive pact with the SSG, and neither will be fighting each other into the future, according to what we're hearing right now from Madloum Abdi, the leader of the Syrian Democratic Forces. He stated that we have open communication channels with the HTS and we will not clash with them, showing that apparently there is some sort of a mutual cooperation right now going on in between the SDF as well as the SSG, and it does not seem as though either will actually be fighting each other for control of the country once the Syrian Arab Republic is destroyed, like some sort of a Game of Thrones sort of thing, where the Syrian Arab Republic falls and then the civil war continues with just two entirely different factions than the one that actually started it. Meanwhile,
that's kind of remarkable that the factions are actually saying that they're going to get along. It almost makes you think that maybe someone's in the background trying to mediate the thing, because typically factions don't get along, especially in Syria. They actually want to fight and kill each other. So the fact that they are coming out and saying it's time now to make peace and make sure that we can take this thing over together, that's a bit of a feat.
It really is a little bit of a feat. It's pretty weird to see. But another thing that is really interesting is that we may be understanding that the Turks are actually the ones who were moderating this entire thing, but we really won't know that until the future. U.S. involvement in this seems to be somewhat limited, but Turkish involvement is starting to seem to be a little bit more of a likelihood, also showing that there may be an uncertain future for the fate of Syria considering Turkish involvement. But moving on from that and into our next clips in the area, we did get to see that an SDF convoy on the eastern side of the Euphrates was preparing to advance into Al-Bukamel to take the city away from the Syrian Arab army, which had already retreated from the area a few hours before.
دخول القوات اتجاه مدينة دير الزور من جسر الصالحية. هاي القوات العسكرية.
Man, TSR, they've got some interesting looking camo.
Let's see here. TSR. What would TSR stand for?
I don't even have a clue, to be honest with you.
Let's see. Two
The
Syrian
same
riches.
rhetoric?
The same rhetoric to Syrian riches? I don't know. Let's see. But we can see the rest of the column here. Oh, look at that. A somewhat slightly armored looking kind of a vehicle.
Almost looked like a Bearcat.
A little bit. It kind of did. Oh, and we can see some Humvees. And then loads and loads of Toyotas. Toyotas seem to be the standard. We could also see a load of Humvees at the front of the column. Just a little while after this video was made, we did get the official declaration from the SDF that all Bakamel was now under complete SDF control, and the Assad regime had been removed from practically the entire banks of the Euphrates River in just a matter of a few short hours. The largest offensive element in the entirety of the country, which was the Euphrates River, had collapsed in less than 12 hours, from what we understand, from the time that the first Syrian forces began to fall back to the moment where the entire banks, every single bank of the Euphrates River was clearly and undoubtedly under Syrian Democratic Forces control. Meanwhile, outside the Syrian Democratic Forces, we were also able to hear that the Free Syrian Army is now making advances as well, and apparently is now trying to lobby for some sort of support from the Israelis indefinitely into the future for some reason. That's according to the Times of Israel, who published this today as a direct quote from the Free Syrian Army commander. But the Free Syrian Army commander stated that we are open to friendship with everyone in the region, including Israel. We have no enemies except the Assad regime, Hezbollah, and Iran, largely ticking off the box for being pro-Western interests for the large part, as these are really the big groups that we are against as a Western alliance inside of the area of the Middle East. We hope that Israel will help us more. We do not know if Israel will be helping them more or not, because we haven't really heard of any follow-through on the Israeli proposition that they may move into southern Syria and create a buffer zone to further protect Israel from any sort of impending attacks. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear some very interesting things inside of Damascus, and a lot has to do with the future of the Syrian government. And this is something that a lot of people have been talking about today. Many of y'all know what I'm about to be telling y'all. Y'all have already seen the midday summary, which had a good bit of this news in it. Not all of it as we have right now, but a good bit of it still. And Russia and Iran have been withdrawing their troops today from Syria and largely telling Assad he's pretty much on his own at this point. And a lot of people are wondering, is Syria truly cooked? Chat, are they cooked? And it seems as though chat believes Syria is cooked, at least from what everyone's saying right now. But Matthew, what are people saying, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so a whopping 76% of the audience said yes, Assad is officially finished, while 14% said mostly, but it's a bit too early to say, and 6% said no, the fight is nowhere near over. And I would say, based on the fact that Russia and Iran are withdrawing their support for Assad, that pretty much seals the deal for the fate of the Assad regime. He is indeed finished, and I agree with the 76%. And once again, he's already fled the country, so he's not even there right now. He's fled with his family already, and that does indicate that he knows that the cat is in the bag at this point. So I would say that he is officially done. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I do believe that the Syrians are truly cooked. The Syrian central government under Assad is finished at this point. There is a load of news and information that we have gotten today that certainly shows that that is the case. Let me tell you all why, with the news itself, why the Syrians are truly cooked. Now that Assad is largely left with only Damascus and Homs under his control, at least for now, it seems as though the situation was not getting better. The situation was looking pretty bad. But then something even more shocking happened as this was starting to unfold earlier on today. And while I was covering the news in the short war video today, we didn't really get to talk about this at all because it had not happened yet. But inside of the area, south of Damascus, there's a very interesting ethnic minority that lives here that's been a part of Syria since its inception after the French Mandate ended and Syria became an independent republic. And that is the Druze people. The Druze people live in the Golan Heights, a little bit of northern Syria, especially everyone will remember the Druze people being attacked at Maj al-Shams by Hezbollah a little while ago and a large amount of children being killed in that attack. But there is still an even larger amount of Druze people who live within the area south of Damascus Damascus. Pretty much the majority of the Syrian population in this area is made up of a ethnic minority of people who are not even considered Syrian. They're considered a completely different ethnic group. And it appears that they've even had enough of the Assad regime as well, as they have now created their own uprising out of the blue. They've immediately aligned themselves with the Syrian Democratic Forces, and they are now in open revolt and armed uprising against the Assad regime and are actively throwing them out of the area. This is probably one of the most shocking uproots of the conflict so far, because Assad was largely assured up until now that he did have control of the Damascus area and at least the surrounding perimeter, and really the fight was just north only, and out in the area around the Euphrates River. It was not around Damascus at that time, but as the information started to develop a little bit further on today, we then saw that the rebels took As-Suwaida, which is one of the larger and more important cities south of Damascus. It's really one of the few that there is, and we were able to see a clip clearly showing that the rebels had already took control of the police headquarters, and here's the video right here. And the next clip we got, they were then tearing down the portraits of Assad and his swaths, who are also inside the police station. They were also doing this very violently, one may add.
Oh my God.
So
man, like I gotta give credit though. Like even though this is pure chaos every time they show up and do something, like there is a bit of like some type of like cheerfulness to it at the same time. Like I'm not sure. Like play it again. I gotta see this again. It's just hell and chaos, but it's got a little ring to it.
Man, I just like how every time a video starts, it's just, it's not even 0 to 100, it's just 100 the whole time, like through the whole video. It's never 0, it's always 100. You gotta appreciate that about the Syrian civil war. Every single video is always wild, unmitigated chaos. So it is always interesting to watch, as this guy is just flinging around an AKM over his head, as they're flinging around a portrait of Assad, and apparently busting the glass out of its frame at the very first part of the video. Let's watch this part again.
I wonder if they're like that before they turned the camera on. Did they have to get themselves hyped up to like film this like a TikTok, or did they just like naturally like walk in here with that type of energy? I wonder.
Dude, you could hear that energy out in the hall before they even made it in the room. Didn't you hear that in the last clip? Like, let's go listen to this again. I gotta refresh your memory, man, because you could already hear like the riot pretty much out in the hall as they were making it to the office. So here it is.
Oh yeah,
they were already hyped up to 100
with that energy, man.
Bro, they did not have
Crazy.
to get that energy. They are the energy. They just wander from place to place with that kind of energy. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we actually got to see that down around the area of Daraa, which was another major city south of Damascus. There's not really many down here, by the way. It's a very populated area, and it is population dense. But as far as actual cities go, the cities are not that big. So Al-Suwaida and Daraa are really the only big ones south of Damascus that would be important for the Syrian government to control, to make sure that the southern areas were anchored down and still largely loyal to the Syrian government. I am not kidding. We got a video out of the middle of the day, in between the video and now, that showed government forces literally running through the streets like it was a Scooby-Doo hijinks as they were trying to run out of the city. They didn't even take the vehicles, which were literally passing by them. They were just running out. They were legging it. Here's the clip. There they are. They are going.
Zoing Scoop, I gotta get out of here.
Like the commander said, like, Zoing Scoop, I think they're taking over. And then one of the Syrian soldiers said, run, Reggie, run. And then they just started running out of the city.
I don't hear snack bar being yelled on the way out. I guess it's only yelled on the way in.
They're kind of chill. Oh.
Oh dear.
Man, it's just someone just got very unlucky off to the left of the video. Someone just said, "You're running by," bam, and then just got him. It's like, well, I guess he ain't running out anymore. But they're still going. It's just an endless stream of government troops just running out of the city.
When the shooting started, it sounded like the guy narrating said, "Da da, he shoot."
That's the end of the clip right there. And then we got to see that apparently these guys, some of these guys weren't running like to exit the city. They were apparently running to go join the rebels, because then we got a clip afterwards that the rebels and the Syrian soldiers all gathered around in an office, putting shoes, which is a massive sign of disrespect, by the way, in the Middle East, on top of a gold bust of Bashar al-Assad as they ate a feast inside one of the government buildings. So it looks like they weren't really, like, some of them weren't running to get away. They were actually running to go join the rebels. So it really shows you how loose of a control Assad actually had over the country, probably for the last few years.
الله حي وعساكر الجيش السوري المنشقين الحلوين.
Man,
أحلى شباب.
they're having like nachos. Or they're holding the Adidas over his head. Oh my God, the disrespect.
Dude, what's worse? They put it on his head. Look at that.
صحتين وعافية يا شباب.
Oh my goodness. The insult.
Man, they got the Yeezys on his head. Oh my God, they're putting two of them up there too.
Oh my lord.
على الصحة.
Dude,
Oh.
this is ultimate insult. Like, this is insane.
شباب الجيش المنشقين محافظة
He doesn't have the
السويداء.
balance though. Oh, he figured
Oh,
it out.
he did it. And thus, the Syrian army south of Damascus is actually turning to the rebels in some instances, and from what we can tell, fairly large numbers. Meanwhile, we also then got to hear that the entirety of the Druze region is in uprising at the moment, and while our front lines are a loose estimate, there's a lot of areas right now that are under an uprising. It looks like everything from Jassim all the way down to As-Suwaida may be under control of the rebels. We were very conservative in our estimate here. We did not include Jassim, but still, it seems as though they're pretty much in control of everything south of Damascus at the moment. And they're starting, at least according to what we're hearing. We haven't gotten video and picture evidence to confirm this 100% yet, but apparently they're only 10 kilometers away from the presidential palace at this moment. I'm not putting this one out there as hardcore news. This is just kind of a statement that we got, and it's one to be interesting because it came from Intel Schizo, who's fairly accurate with what they say, but apparently rebel forces have been spotted just 10 kilometers away from the presidential palace, showing that they're actually making it into Damascus itself at this point, at least from what we're hearing at the moment. But still, a lot of people are starting to talk about something even further that we have to address right here about what's going to be happening with the fall of Syria and the fall of Ukraine, to tie the two together. And Matthew, what are people thinking, and what are you thinking as well?
All right. So, to address this poll question right here, it says, is Syria's fall good for Ukraine? And will Russia bring its equipment back from Syria to use against them? So, 56% of the audience said, yes, it's good, and it will not help Russia by Russia bringing back their equipment, while 18% said it really doesn't make a difference, and 15% said that no, it's bad, and it helps Russia fight Ukraine. And on this one, I would say it certainly is not good that Russia would be bringing back equipment. Obviously, that is not a good thing, but at the same time, I really don't think it's going to make much of a difference on the battlefield, because right now, the issue is the manpower that Russia is using is very, very undertrained, and also they really don't know what they're doing. So when they go into Ukraine, they're simply getting killed within 2 weeks, and it's over with. So I don't think having some more Humvees or things like that is really going to help Russia out at all. So I'm largely with the 56%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my general opinion, I believe that the Syrian government is largely cooked. The Russian Federation will probably not be able to take advantage of that in the future by moving more forces into Ukraine. There isn't really a lot of forces that would translate perfectly over into being used in Ukraine. There's largely only naval, army aviation, and Russian Air Force aviation inside of Syria, and it's not in incredibly large amounts. It didn't really take a lot to help out the Syrian Arab Republic in the first place, so it's not really going to be creating any major difference if it had to end up being used inside of Ukraine. There's just not enough of it to really make a difference. And so I hope that addresses that fairly well. But moving on into the real big news, the major news that many people saw in the title and I haven't gotten to yet, the Russians are leaving Syria from what we know. If the rebels take Homs, and we know that they will, because at this point it's no question about it, it's going to fall, we are going to see that the Russians are completely cut off from the rest of Syria. And the Russians do not have any ground forces in the area around Latakia and Tartus to be able to hold down their bases. So once the rebels start to advance towards those areas, the Russians are finished. There's no way for them to actually defend the airfield and the naval base that they have. So they are leaving, and we were able to see that today they are already packing up the air defense, a critical component of the Latakia air base, and shipping it on south towards Tartus to be loaded onto Russian vessels and then shipped back into the area of the Russian Federation. We could see the air defense systems leaving right here. One of the last times we'll ever see a Russian S-300 in Syria. And that's the end of that clip. But that's a little sad, isn't it? Just a little sad. And we were able to hear that apparently a Russian military blogger of some notoriety also weighed in as well, largely our assessment that we had already been putting out for a little while, because it looks like reality is starting to hit the Russians hard. Now, Matthew, you remember this mill blogger, right? Oh, I don't know if Matthew's even on the call or not right now. We were having some lag issues
Yeah, I
earlier.
remember.
All right, we'll be waiting.
Yep. Yeah, I'm still on the call.
Okay, all right. Well, anyways, I think the lag's too bad to even talk at the moment because we have like a 30-second delay. But beyond that, the Russian military blogger did say that the Russian embassy in Syria is giving a fairly transparent hint, and it was a lot more transparent before after he even made this post. But the Russian embassy in Syria reminds Russian citizens living in the SAR of the possibility of leaving the country on commercial flights through operating airports. The situation in the country is heating up with each passing hour, and according to the reports from the field, the militants have already reached the outskirts of Om. If they take the city and make a dash to the border with Lebanon, the governments of Tartus and Latakia will be pretty much undefended and will be cut off from the rest of the country. Army and tactical aviation of the Russian aerospace forces are doing everything possible to slow down the militants' advance, but without support on the ground, this is unlikely to succeed. And the Syrian army is not yet showing any particular readiness to fight for its country. And then he put in the embassy hotline as well, just for fun, just to remind everyone that there is at least a somewhat operational Russian embassy in Syria at the time. But it's still showing us that the Russians are losing a lot of faith at the moment in staying in Syria. And not only that, we are getting video and picture evidence from the ground that is a damning bit of information showing that they're already packing up and leaving the country at this point. Not a great thing for the future of Russia and the Russian Federation, not only in the Middle East, but also within the area of North Africa and East Africa as well, as Syria was actually a hopping point, a jumping point for Russian aircraft that were flying from the Russian Federation and into West Africa, carrying mercenary groups and supplies to continue their efforts in this area. This means that with the fall of Syria, not only are they losing their only anchor point in the Middle East that allowed them a small diplomatic say in how things were going, they are also losing their actual air bridge into Western Africa, meaning that a lot of what Wagner has been doing pretty much throughout the entirety of the Syrian civil war and then stopped doing recently will never be done again by any other Russian group probably in the future. It'll become a lot more difficult for them to do and a lot more expensive. Considering the Russian economy is shrinking every day and they really don't have a lot of money, we are expecting that they will probably see a complete cessation of Russian activities within Western Africa probably in the next year or two. And we'll probably also see that Russian diplomatic efforts inside the Middle East to pursue their own interests will also be fading as well. But then inside of Damascus, we were even hearing some more concerning news as the Russians started to tell Russian citizens that they need to leave the country now. There was no wait. There was no try and reconsider travel. No, you got to leave now. The government is collapsing, and they do not want any Russian citizens left behind because they might not be received too well by the new people who will be in charge here soon. Meanwhile, we then heard that Iran is now evacuating its forces and top generals from the area of Damascus, according to a statement that was made to the New York Times today from a senior Iranian official. And we've also been able to hear, on top of that, that it really truly is over. Russia has informed Syrian President Bashar al-Assad that moving forward, their intervention and support for the Syrian Arab army against rebel offensives now in the northeast and south of the country will be limited, largely saying that Bashar al-Assad is entirely on his own. And last but not least, the worst information came out even later. The government is fleeing. There has been reports of defections within the Syrian government, including the prime minister and a number of ministers, as they are boarding private planes and leaving the country as fast as they possibly can. We then also heard what was even crazier. Assad, who actually has been in the country, we apparently had some questionable information earlier, actually was preparing to flee Syria with his family. His family, from what we know, still is in the area of Moscow at this moment in the Four Seasons Hotel, but he then fled, and I'll be getting to that information here in a second, to the city of Tehran. They actually flew to Tehran and escaped to Iran. It appears that he's going to be living in exile inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran well on into the future, and that's probably where he's going to end up dying as well. No one's really going to want him to be anywhere else outside of Iran. He's not really a popular person outside of his own inner circle, and so for that reason, that's pretty much where he'll stay in exile. But still, The news has been shocking today. There is no way to get about it. The Russians' attempt to create a Russian Middle East is going to completely fail with the fall of the Syrian Arab Republic. While the United States has succeeded and failed in different cases in creating a American and Western sphere in the Middle East, but largely succeeded in the long run, the Russian Federation's only attempt in Syria will end up becoming a failure after 12 hard-fought years of trying to see it to success. That is a terrible thing to see for the Russians, a great thing to see for the West, and it's crazy to think that it's happening right now. A 12-year war is ending in 12 days. The Russians can only dream to have that happen because their 3-day war turned into 3 years. Now we're seeing that Syria's 12-year war turned into 12 days. But still, I gotta say, hopefully to hear that Matthew's mic is working, Matthew, this is a crazy day in news.
It really is a crazy day. It's a crazy day in lag, too, but thankfully, I think I'm back. But yeah, I wonder why al-Assad went to Tehran, that is, instead of going back to Moscow. It seems like maybe he would have wanted to go back to Moscow, because I don't think exactly Tehran's a perfect place to go for him. I think he'd prefer to go back to Moscow if he had an option. So I wonder what that's about.
I don't really know what it's about. It's a really weird move. I believe that the Iranian government may be trying to help him create a government in exile, and that also helps us to address something that's been going around that appears to be untrue. People have been claiming that the Kingdom of Jordan and I believe I don't know what the official name of Egypt is. The official name of Egypt. Let me go find it, because we could just call it Egypt, but it's actually the Arab Republic of Egypt. So the Arab Republic of Egypt and the Kingdom of Jordan have been claimed today by some sources that they have been requesting that Bashar al-Assad create a government in exile. And that makes no sense. We actually saw that the Kingdom of Jordan has already made an official statement claiming that they have never made such a statement or a claim to Bashar al-Assad or anyone else, and they actually support the collapse of the Bashar al-Assad regime inside of Syria. And we would believe that the Egyptians would have absolutely no comment, because the Egyptians never really make a comment on external affairs and largely try and remain isolationist, at least in terms of their foreign policy. And I know a lot of people are going to be bringing up all kinds of things from 40 years ago. The Egyptian government has changed over the course of the past 40 years and is not at all the kind of government that was under the control of Nasser way back in the 50s and 60s when they created the Fatah, which was the first armed insurgent organization inside the Gaza Strip, which largely was the predecessor to Hamas itself. We largely assume that that none of that information is true. The Kingdom of Jordan has already come out and debunked that by an official government statement. The Egyptians probably would not want to see Assad back in control, because if Assad's government is going to collapse, it would be much more beneficial for the Kingdom of Jordan and Egypt to see a new Syria that is stable instead of an unstable Syria that may return back to its old ways. That just wouldn't benefit anyone in the region, and so for that point, we believe that that statement is completely untrue. However, the Islamic Republic of Iran may want him to create a government in exile so that way they can sponsor and fund largely terrorist organizations that will be able to continue some covert operations in Syria and largely become the main pipeline to continue to funnel Hezbollah with arms, money, and equipment to be able to continue to fight the war against Israel, as well as Hamas fighting Israel as well. That's another big thing that the fall of Syria also signals in as well, is that with the fall of Syria, the Islamic Republic of Iran is no longer going to have a clear supply line, at least on paper, into Lebanon to continue to support Hezbollah forces. Hezbollah is pretty much being cut off at this point. They've reached the top of the tab of the bar, and they're getting cut off by the Syrians themselves. The Syrian Arab Republic's government under Assad was the one that would allow the Iranians to land in Damascus and then smuggle the equipment into Lebanon to Hezbollah, although they really just drove it across the border, to be entirely honest. It was really no smuggling operation. But that's largely how it had been going since 2011 and 2012, when the Civil War started. Now with that group collapsing, maybe the SSG may allow that. I'm not really thinking that they will, actually. They probably will end up becoming a very peaceful government, maybe, at least outwardly, kind of like the Emirate of Afghanistan has, so that way they're not getting involved in any larger conflicts or biting off more than they can chew, because everyone, I think, has gotten it very clear in their minds in the Middle East: don't mess with the United States. The only people who don't know that are the Iranians, but everyone else understands, do not mess with the United States, because they will come in here and they will kill all of our national leaders who conducted that attack, and then they'll also start reforming a brand new government. And so it's probably not a good thing to mess with the United States or America American and Western interests. So for that reason, I don't really think that the SSG would support that kind of activity in the future, because they probably would not want to get crosshairs put on them by the United States of America. That would be at least my assumption, but nevertheless, there has been a lot of stupid factions in the Middle East who have never learned that you never want the crosshairs of the Republic on you, and they might end up actually allowing Hezbollah to continue to be resupplied through Syria. I'm highly doubting it, though. We know that the SDF certainly will not, and we know that the Free Syrian Army would certainly not allow that either. And also the Druze people would probably not allow that. The only group that we have to kind of question is the SSG, but beyond that, we are fairly certain that the axis of evil has pretty much lost its grip on the Middle East as a whole with the fall of the Assad regime. Still, an absolutely crazy thing, and it still is hard to wrap our mind around the fact that somehow, some way, just out of the blue, over the past really, like maybe like a week and a half, it's almost been like 10 days now, the Assad regime has collapsed. I mean, this has been going on the entire time, by the way, that we've been covering the Ukraine war. Little bits of the Syrian civil war would butt out, and I would see it, and you would see action and fighting going on at the Euphrates, or just outside of Aleppo, or near Idlib, or something along those lines, but it wasn't really a lot. It was very low intensity, and it looked like this would just be a forever war that would drag on endlessly, and there would never be an end in sight, and it was just going to be a fractured country from that point forward. But then, just out of the blue, they took Aleppo, and then they've never stopped since then. They've just continued to race through the entirety of the country, and it looks like there is no end to it. There's quite literally no end to this at all in sight. We have a belief, very strong belief at this point, much like many of y'all do, that the Bashar al-Assad regime is most likely going to end. It's a fairly good thing on the surface. The only part that's a little questionable is that we don't know what the SSG will do. We have seen, though, that apparently CNN actually got an exclusive interview today with the leader of the SSG. Did you see that, Matthew?
I did not see that. You watching CNN, man? Did you see that on CNN?
I'm not watching CNN, but I saw it on Twitter, and so I listened a little bit. And the leader of the SSG, dude, I think because people were making fun of it today in the memes, at the beginning, he used to be like, God shall decide judgment. Now he's like, we need proper spreadsheets. We need everyone to have Excel. We have to have the proper institutions and bureaucracies. Like, he's ended up becoming a paper pusher from 2014 to now. He's really changed. So
That's a hard transition. It was a very hard transition for the Taliban, which was largely a terrorist force for a long time. It was a hard thing for them to turn around and start turning into a bureaucracy and start flying around on private jets and doing diplomacy. That was like a weird thing to see. And also the Taliban found it even weirder. And now these people over here in Syria are going to figure that out for themselves also. It's a lot harder to govern than it is to actually have a rebel movement, and they will eventually find that out. But honestly, Enforcer, I'm a little bit concerned that maybe another group might appear, for example, the one starting with an I, and they might show up and start fighting with the SSG and the other group that they just allied with a short while ago. And that might pose a bit of a problem, because if the group starting with an I comes in and gets some sort of victory, well, we could be in a worse spot than when Assad was there. So right now, until there's like a really, really stable SSG form of governance, if that's even possible, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, because it could get sideways quick.
Well, we really don't know what's going to be happening, because you're saying an SSG governance. We don't know how it's going to end up, because right now the two sides have a fairly strong peace treaty with each other, and they're not engaging in combat. Some people are actually saying that Syria may actually be split up, and there may be some sort of a SDF controlled area of Syria that becomes an independent state, and then the area under SSG control, which controls a majority of the population centers, will actually split and end up becoming its own state as well. We may actually see that in some timeline in the future, the country is actually divided directly along the length of the Euphrates River, which may end up becoming a fairly high possibility, considering that's a natural landmark, and it's also a major regional landmark as well, because the cultures shift pretty much once you cross the Euphrates River. So we may actually see, for the first time in history, that mythical Kurdish state that everyone's always been talking about may end up existing on the northern side as the SDF, and then the southern side is controlled and administered as some sort of an emirate by the Emirate of Syria, which will most likely be what the SSG evolves into, at least what we're guessing at this point.
I wonder if fracturing Syria into two parts like that would be a worse or a better thing than simply leaving it as an entire Syria. I think the best case scenario that we could have is that you try to get as many of these rebel groups together as possible and try to get them to get along with each other, so that way they can collectively be strong enough to fight off ISIS. I'm just going to go ahead and say it because I'm getting tired of trying to say the group that starts with an I. They have to be able to fight that ISIS group off, because if they can't, then Syria is probably going to fall to them, because it looks like ISIS has largely been sitting dormant, and it looks like they could rear their heads up at any moment now and decide to attack the SSG or whatever group is currently in control of Syria or the populated areas of it. So I don't know. Like, I think the U.S. better be working in the background to make sure these groups have enough support to be able to hold the area. But once again, I think it's pretty much imperative at this point that the ISIS group is not allowed to come back, because if they come back, it's going to be a shit show, for lack of better words.
Well, one thing we do know is that if ISIS comes back, it's not just going to be somewhere everyone goes, oh, whatever. Like, there was a multinational coalition. Quite literally, everyone got involved to crush them. That's really why the Russians and the United States are still in Syria to this day, is because we got heavily involved in crushing them in Iraq and Syria when they formed. It really wasn't the Syrian Arab Army or the SDF or the SSG that ended up defeating ISIS. It was really the United States of America, Iraq, and then a bunch of multinational coalitions that actually ended up destroying ISIS over the 4 years that they really existed, from 2014 to 2018, as a landmass. So if that starts to happen again, I would assume that U.S. military involvement would be guaranteed. We would probably see that U.S. forces would be flooding into the area and making sure to crush or at least stamp out ISIS as much as possible. And then we may even see that there would be an attempt or an offer to the Syrian governments of a multinational coalition permanently staying in Syria, based in semi-permanent basis, to make sure that an ISIS uprising does not happen again at any point in the future. Because we are. Go ahead.
I've got an idea. How about this? How about this, Enforcer? How about the U.S. goes into Syria and invades Syria, and we take the place over, and then we install a democracy?
Hell no. Like, no, that's a terrible idea, man.
Oh,
Especially,
so bad.
I say just let the Syrians figure it out. Like, whatever happens, as long as they are not pro-Russian and, well, not pro-Russian, but pro-Axis, so that just means leaning towards Iran, China, or Russia, I'm fine with whatever they get, even if it isn't a democratic form of government. The SDF are the people we are backing up and rooting for. But as long as this area returns to a somewhat stable condition, even if it is under the SSG and it turns into some sort of an emirate, that is really largely a Syrian concern, not our concern. Really, all we need to care about is if it is a stable country that will not be going against our interests in the area, or largely will be benevolent in pursuing their external ambitions outside of Syria's borders. If that can be assured, I think things will be fine. But if that cannot be assured, then I would say that we probably will have to get actively involved and conduct some form of military intervention, because having a new faction pop up in the area that will start to lean towards the Axis side, that is something that we cannot have. That's something that we simply cannot tolerate. But I hope that does address that the best I can, at least with what I think will be happening in Syria, or what should happen in Syria. And also, let's see. Some people said, don't joke that, oh, well, what the hell? Well, you can't joke with, is comedy dead? Well, come on.
He was just joking. He was joking when he said that. He was making a joke there. But I saw Daniel Hofpar say, Enforcer Matt, I heard they had WMDs in Syria. Now, seriously, can you imagine, like, for example, let's say Enforcer or me was in charge, and someone said, we should go into Syria and make sure we have it unified with a democracy. How do we make that happen? And someone shows up in the corner and says, I heard they have nukes. And they said, who said that? Him over there. They have nukes. Okay, well, let's just invade then. They have nukes. And then you go in and find out, they don't have nukes after all. Whoops, sorry. And then it's just a total disaster. We don't want to repeat that again for sure.
I think the only reason, here's the only reason I would believe that there needs to be U.S. military intervention in Syria at any point. This is the only condition I would say that it needs to happen. If the SSG takes over most of the country, declares war on the SDF, and then the civil war pretty much begins again, it's just those two factions now instead of the Syrian Arab Republic, and then they also say, you know what, we're going to align with Iran. And then that's when I'd say we need to get involved in not really invade and then set up a government from the ground up. We really just need to get involved on the SDF side at that point, crush the SSG, and then allow the SDF to largely govern and control the country, and then figure out its destiny from that point forward. We would stay there as peacekeepers, ensuring that an uprising didn't happen that would destroy the SDF. But beyond that, I wouldn't really want to see the United States getting getting heavily involved. This is mostly, of course, an internal domestic affair, and while we have to ensure our strategic interests are taken care of and the Russians are put down for the large part in this area, we don't want to get too involved. Getting too involved just it isn't vogue anymore, really, and on top of that, it doesn't really work from what we've seen with historical precedents. So with that, I hope we've covered all that well, at least on our analysis side of things. But before we move on into the next piece of news, which just moves us right outside of Syria and a little east and into Iran, I want to make sure that we can address a couple of juicy questions. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our first juicy, well done T-bone steak question goes to Mr. Shrewman Kid, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. Shrewman Kid, for that support. He said, Canada boosting Arctic presence with USA, and can we touch on some Canadian-Russian subjects? And it seems to not be talked about on this ongoing conflict.
And also, by the way, Matthew, I'm seeing a rash of political comments on the live chat that keep distracting me. I was just wanting to let you know, I don't know if you can see them. I have top chat on, and they are showing up like a mass. Like, I'm looking at that, I'm like, dang, that's a lot of them. But can you reread that again really quickly?
So Mr. Shrewman Kid says, Canada boosting Arctic presence with USA, and can we touch on some Canadian-Russia subjects? And it seems to not be talked about on this ongoing conflict.
And I thank you so much for the support. The reason why it's not really talked about much in this conflict is because it's not really a part of the conflict, kind of like America's holdings in Alaska aren't really a part of the conflict. It's just that the Russians always run their mouths, and so people sit there and go, are they really going to try and take Alaska? It's like, no. It's like, you know, if you sit there and listen to the Tucker Carlson interview with Lavrov, you would think that America has no nuclear weapons, no military, and gets nuked. You know, like, it just gets nuked and can't do anything about it. What I would say with Canada and the United States is that while we are increasing our Arctic presence, it's really most likely just to get some experience with Arctic combat. Probably because we're seeing that if there is a war possible with the Russian Federation, we need to be prepared to fight in extreme conditions in the northern Scandinavian areas, much like you would see, at least climate-wise, in northern Canada. That's probably why we're doing that at the time, or it may be an attempt to try and use that as a cover-up to build more listening posts or any kind of detection relays inside of northern Canada that would pick up most conventional ICBMs being launched by Russia and their flight path over into the United States. It's probably one way or another, for the most part, because that's probably what we'd expect. There just isn't really a lot that involves the United States and Canada directly in the conflict, and that's just never why we really talk about either of them much. Because as far as the conflict is concerned in Syria or Russia or even in East Asia with anyone, it largely is a thing that the United States and Canada is literally thousands of miles away from, and we don't really get directly affected by any of it, although we are directly reacting to all of it. So, with that in mind, that's kind of the reason why. Also, another thing is that Canada can never be feasibly invaded by the Russian Federation. Canada actually is in a very good defensible spot. Most of the population centers are in between Montreal and Toronto. Really, all the way down in between Detroit and Montreal. That's really where most of the Canadian people live inside of Canada. No one else really lives in the rest of Canada. And not only that, the larger area of the West Coast, British Columbia, is mired with massive mountain ranges, I mean incredibly large ones, that don't really have a lot of infrastructure in them, which would make it logistically impossible for the Russian Federation to support a large armed force moving through this area. And not only that, a landing in the Northwest Territories or Nunavut would be completely impossible. There's no way to actually move through these areas. There are no real paved roads, and so supporting a large invading force in this area would pretty much be impossible. Another thing that's also not mentioned much even in that analysis, not only are the natural barriers to invading Canada incredibly difficult to overcome, but the actual way to get to Canada is incredibly difficult, because not only does the Canadians have the Royal Canadian Navy, they also have the United States Navy as well, which would be protecting them simultaneously. So a Russian landing fleet of any sizable proportion that could even get a small landing force to Canada would most likely be destroyed before it even made it close to the Canadian coastline, either in the Arctic Circle, in the Northwest Territories, or the Yukon, or Nunavut, or even down here near the area of British Columbia. It would be practically impossible to do such a thing. That's pretty much like saying the Russians will invade Alaska, which also, at least logistically, would be pretty tough, if not impossible to do. And so that's what I would generally have to assess the situation with. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And I got to thank you so much once again for support, Mr. Sherman Kid. And also, let's see. And I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least on Canadian-Russian subjects of a possible invasion, because that's really the only subject I can think about, because beyond that, Canada and Russia really don't have an extreme amount of direct interactions with each other. Kind of like how the United States, crazily enough, actually doesn't have a lot of direct interactions with the Russians. The Russians just say, like, just wild statements kind of directed at America, but never really talk to us too much. And when they do, it's a pretty big deal, at least whenever anyone in the U.S. government talks to the Russian government in any way, shape, or form. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A huge thanks to you once again for the support, Mr. Sherman Kid. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Marion Deemer, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Marion, as well, for that very generous support.
Hey!
And Marion says, Russian roulette anyone, Putin is the loser, Slav Ukraine, and Hiram Slava.
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say, it does look like the Russians, at least Putin, is playing some form of Russian roulette. And he's losing a lot. He's lost Syria, he's losing in Ukraine, he's losing everywhere. I mean, I don't think the guy ever wins at this point. He has won so much he has gotten tired of winning. He's just losing at this point. I don't know why. You would think that he'd eventually pack up and go home while he's behind, but he just keeps on going, and it has no end in sight. But I do thank you so much for the support, Santiago Flores, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because it is, I mean, Marion Deemer. I don't know why I said Santiago Flores, but I gotta thank you so much once again, Marion Deemer, for supporting this channel and helping you to keep on running. Because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And Slava Ukraini and Hiram Slava, and I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least in my honest opinion. And so with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into Iran, and then very quickly on into Ukraine.
All right, so our last one here goes to Leora Abigail, a channel legend like Marion Deemer, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Leora, for that support. And she said, Assad is screwed. The amount of times that snack bar was chanted, the snacks are free from Assad. Soccer moms freed Syria. Also, is Hot Dog Man still in the ER to scam anyone to get a free chair? And no more snacks for the Hot Dog Man.
And I thank you for the support. To answer the last part first, I don't think he is. I actually think that he's back to running streams or something like that. Let me go check really quickly. I haven't checked on the Hot Dog Man in at least a hot week. Because the last thing I heard that he was in the ER, I was like, wham, boo-hoo, cry about it. And then I just went on. But let's see. Let's see. Hang on. I don't... Oh no, Matthew. He's doing a new thumbnail format, and it looks terrible. He lost another 100 subscribers, by the way, for that. Apparently, his punishment.
Oh,
very
no.
Unfortunate.
100 subscribers leaving? How can that be? It's like the Russians and Iranians abandoning people, what's happening on a YouTube channel.
And let's see here. Hang on here. Let me see here. Oh, dang. You know, I don't know what he's doing anymore. I have no clue, but he's failing, whatever he's doing. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support, Leora Abigail, and it appears that he is not going to be getting that chair. I just think he doesn't even have enough people around that care about him to give him a chair at this point. But I would agree with you. Assad is screwed. When you have that many people yelling, you know, free snacks at the snack bar, you're going to have so many free snacks, it's insane. It's like a duty-free shop at that point. And I would have to say that he is getting a load of them. And soccer moms did free Syria. We got to give a massive shout out to all of those soccer moms of the nation of Syria who liberated their country from Bashar al-Assad, because they finally got it straight into the goal, straight into Damascus, which was, I suppose, their goal. But I do thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that addresses that the best I can, Leora Abigail, because you're a channel legend and your support helps this channel to keep on running. We run this thing day in and day out thanks to y'all support only. That's the way we pay our bills and do this as a full-time job, and we got to thank every single person who supports this channel massively, because y'all do not have to. Nevertheless, y'all make this thing possible out of y'all's generosity, pretty much. And so with that, We are now moving on into the next bit of news, which is inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran, where we got to hear that apparently the Iranians have now backed out of their short-term promise to the international agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency, as they have now abandoned their short-lived pledge to stop enriching uranium close to levels needed for nuclear weapons. Well, isn't that crazy? Who would have thunk it? Like a crazy dictatorship once again trying to develop a nuclear weapon. I never saw that one coming. Did y'all? I didn't. I mean, that's news. That's why we're reporting it. But moving on out of the Islamic Republic of Iran and into South Korea, we did hear that the president of South Korea, Yoon Suk Yeol, was to soon make an announcement over national television, at least at some point in the future. Although, to be honest with y'all, we have not heard that announcement made yet. So we don't know what's happening with that, but we are still waiting. But moving on out of South Korea and on into Georgia, we have now seen how great the Russians have fallen. You know what they say, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. In this case, the Russians weren't really that big, but they still fell like a sack of potatoes. Many Russian veterans will understand that one. But beyond that, inside of the area of Abkhazia, some would know that we covered a little while ago that there was an actual coup that happened against the president of Abkhazia. Abkhazia is a Russian-created puppet state that exists within the area of western Georgia and has existed since 2009 at the end of the Russo-Georgian War. Since then, the Russians have largely controlled the country, but recently a coup was conducted because a whole bunch of rich Russians wanted to come down and buy up all of the coastline, push the natives inland pretty much into poverty, and then live on the coasts in these nice resort towns. The government was overthrown by the locals, and the opposition is now taking control, and the Russians, being as powerful and mighty as they are, did not invade the country like they normally would have to overthrow the opposition and then install their puppet guy back in charge. They actually resorted to sanctioning their own puppet state, and are now stopping them from shipping in tangerines into Russia. I'm not even kidding. That's how bad it's gotten for them. Look at this. Russia has suspended all co-financing of Abkhazia except for pensions, and Russia also banned the import of tangerines.
I didn't know they grew tangerines there in that place.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know they did either. And then I pulled it up, and it actually turns out it's a pretty big export for them as tangerines to the Russians. So, what do you know? I mean, like, that's kind of wild when you think about it, you know, like, the Russians are so weak they can't even send in a small force of maybe a couple of hundred to go overthrow the government in Abkhazia, which is what they would normally do. They literally sanctioned tangerines. They went from thinking that the world was in their grasp, playing games in Syria, in West Africa, and everywhere around the world, and even in Eastern Europe, and they've now been whittled down to the point they're going to fight squabbles over tangerines. That tells you how far they've fallen. Put tangerines in the live chat if you think the Russians have truly been cooked at this point. But moving on out of that, we were also able to see that something happened in Mykop, finally getting into the Ukraine war news. We don't know exactly what this was. There was some smoke rising in the distance, though, inside of Mykop. But we just don't know what it was. There it is again. We're going to be trying to get more information on that tomorrow, but at the moment, we know that something's happened. We just don't know exactly what it was and what's been damaged. Meanwhile, on the front lines in Ukraine, we've also been seeing in the Kursk Oblast that the Russians have been getting jumped again by the Ukrainians as they've continued to try and conduct their offensives, but have not really been making a lot of ground or progress. Oh, they've got a new kind of music here.
It faded in slow, too. I was like, what is that?
Man, it's crazy stuff right there. When you see the Russians wandering around their BTR-80. Oh, and they're driving off before they even got in it. Oh my lord, they drove over an anti-tank mine. Oh, and now we got hit by an FPV. It's over now. It's so over. And they just got hit by another anti-tank mine. 2 BTRs are completely out of action. The third one's now trying to leave. People are running behind it trying to hop on board. But it looks like they've now been left behind promptly. Some Russians are crawling into the trees. Look at them go. You know what they say, Matt? You gotta crawl before you walk.
It's true. And sometimes they can't even crawl, so they're definitely not walking.
Man, I'm telling you what, man. Sometimes they're not even crawling, man. They're just laying.
Also, I don't know what it is tonight, but the YouTube studios is breaking up on us terribly. Like, I don't know why.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty bad, actually. But we were also able to see FPV drones coming in and catching them on fire. Oh, look at that Russian. Oh, he's gone. He just lied down. Have a lie down, buddy. He's just kind of chilling out there. We see them continuing to lay down. The cameraman just making sure that they stay down. We can now see a wide variety of Russians. We can even see some of them laying out in the fields just taking naps. It's a very lazy day out there in the Kursk Oblast. It's a sleepy day. People like naps. We were also able to see the Ukrainians hitting some Russian military armored cars and other kinds of cars in the Kursk Oblast as well, in an area near to, I believe it was not Bolshoi Soldatskoy. Oh my lord, I'm getting so bad with the names these days of towns. I believe it was, let's see, Kromsky Bicky. Yeah, it was Kromsky Bicky. So here's the clip again. Getting back to it, and we can now see them slamming their FPVs down into the roofs of the cars. That one's roasting. We now see a Sprinter van getting hit. I guess there is no same-day delivery with that one. Or I guess it was a same-day delivery to God, one or the other.
A Sprinter van has a whole new meaning when you're on a battlefield. Like it's literally sprinting.
And this one's sprinting, but it is no longer. It's like a horse of the race course that tripped and fell. Oh! And here comes another one. I think that was a Buhanka. And then we can see the drone circling around, making sure to survey the debris. I don't know what they just hit right there. It had like spikes on top of it. They hit another Buhanka. Here's a tank, actually. This may be the biggest prize target of the day. And it looks like they may have gotten that one, although the clip cut off too early to really tell. But moving on from that and into our next clip out of the area of Kursk, we are now moving into our location unknowns, where we were able to see an FPV drone hitting a Ukrainian MRAP, but it seems as though everyone was fine. Check this out. This is actually pretty crazy. If the video loads, we are buffering. I don't know what's up with this. Matthew, are you on the call still fine?
I'm still on the call, but it's like the internet's real slow tonight for some reason.
Man, you gotta love internet service providers, don't you? You got to love them, don't you?
I thought we got fiber finally. Well, how come we don't have fiber?
We have fiber and nothing has really improved, I'm not gonna lie. It's still rough sometimes. That's annoying. But let's see here. If the video loads at all, we just keep on hearing Mario Kart music in the background like every second, and then... Okay, there it is again. It sounds like they're on Rainbow Road.
Oh, dear Lord.
And
our internet's working kind of like the Russians work.
Oh, and then it stopped again. Any second now.
What are those dangly bits up there on the front of this thing? Is that a rearview mirror or an antenna?
I don't know what that is, man. Like, I think that may be an whipper, you know, or something like that.
Interesting.
Oh, wait, it's an actual song. I thought it was something in the MRAP. But so, anyways, we're going to keep watching the clip. It's kind of like a slideshow at this point. I hope y'all are enjoying the slideshow. As someone comes in and goes, "Long live Russia!" There you go, buddy. Congratulations, you won the war with that one. I'm telling you, man, the whole war has been won. Rainbows have appeared over the Kremlin, and Putin smiles, and he weeps one tear of joy for you because you really saved the entire world with that comment in this live chat. I congratulate you for that, and you should be awarded with Hero of the Russian Federation for that one. Truly, you are a patriot. But we can see here that finally the clip loaded. The FPV hit right in the windshield that he was looking through, yet they survived.
Also, I'm not sure, but I think Twitter might be having issues as well. They might be having a little bit of an outage.
Oh no, is it a cyber attack? Is it a cyber attack?
I don't know. I don't know. It's my assumption, though, because it looks like I'm having some Twitter loading issues.
We're going to be moving on from that clip and into our next one, where we got to see an Su-27 in Ukraine as well, which was pretty cool. And here are some of the pictures, which we can see right here. Really neat overall. We love to see that kind of stuff. It's just nice. And then we also got to see the Russian casualty report as well over the past 24 hours. And holy moly!
Oh, we got 3 Bobcats today, bringing us up to 3,633 Bobcats. That is tremendous to see once again. But, Enforcer, tell us about these hideous troop losses. Like, tell us more.
I gotta tell you, the losses are horrendous. 1,660 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 46 APCs, 56 supply trucks, 8 main battle tanks, 20 artillery pieces, 46 drones, 2 cruise missiles, and 3 Bobcat skid steers. And according to Miss Disa, the keeper of the records, 1,660 troops is the 12th highest daily loss, tied with November 9th of 2024, and the 7-day average and weekly total remains about 1,700 and 12,000 respectively. And a big shout out to Misty Issa, keeper of the records, for giving us that summary of the casualty report. Meanwhile, moving on from the location unknowns, it's now time for us to get up into the northern area near the Bodanivsky, where we got to see a special forces group called the Omega Delta Group in action. It seems as though there may be some copyright infringement there. Maybe the Delta Force would like to check in on it. We can hear some kind of music in the background. It sounded like someone was throwing up right there when I muted it. But we can now see them getting outside the vehicle and moving into the tree lines at the break of dawn. You know what they say, the early bird gets the worm. Or better yet, the Special Forces gets the rooski. Oh, and there went a grenade. And now they're clearing out a dugout, tossing grenades in, engaging in some close quarters action.
Got a little spark, got a little something. Ooh, bang.
And now they're going into the darkness, popping sparks. I guess we could call it that. That's not bad. We now see them getting down, moving through a tree line, looking around, walking, looking more, walking some more, looking around on their phone, looking some more. An explosion hits. Another explosion nearby. We can now see him trying to tend to a wound on someone's arm.
Oh, man, he's getting the tourniquet. That's got to be painful.
That has to be. And we now see them going down into a dugout. Possibly into shelter. Maybe. Sitting around some more. Firing at some Russians. Firing a machine gun as they're in some kind of a dugout. We now see the Ukrainian armored car has arrived. It looks like a Rochelle Senator. You now see them moving down the road, getting hit by a mortar round. We're not really sure how bad off anyone is in that clip. Then sitting around in a grassy field. A grassy knoll. Many people know that one. We can see them on a road. We can see them firing a machine gun. We can see them looking around a damaged APC and firing a machine gun. We see an MRAP passing by at about 90 miles an hour. And then we can see their little watermark right there at the end of the clip. Big shout out to these guys. They've done great work today, as usual. But moving on from that and down to the area of Seversk, we also got to see some of the tanks of the 3rd Tank Brigade in action. Oh, and we got to mute that. I'm so sorry, everyone. Boof! But the Russians, they're going to be real sorry. And they were getting slammed today by the Ukrainian T-72, as the video buffers. And some people have got to ask, is their tank driver a crook? Well, I'm not a crook. And there's the Russians right there. And you're about to see them get blasted. And they're really getting blasted.
Some people say that the Russians asked the cameraman to shoot them.
And I gotta tell you that they obliged that request. They shot him good.
Yes. 2 times, actually.
Now listen, if we don't start winning in Ukraine, we're gonna have to start bombing Georgia. Or something like that. Yeah, not just do something wild. Just something insane. Just to get things going. But we can see the artillery landing in the tree line. And we now see a Russian APC trying to quickly and swiftly move down the road. But it looks as though that's not going to be successful. We now see something firing. We now see a Ukrainian tank right there. It's sputtering up, moving on down the tree line. Meanwhile, the Russians are hearing the engines rumble and bumble as they move over their trench line, and they're going, sounds like someone's breaking in. It's just a tank, Dick.
Listen,
sit down.
Calm down, Dick. It's just a storm. Sit down, Dick.
Oh, man. But we can see the Ukrainian tanks firing on the Russians at point-blank ranges as the videos load like slideshows. And laying down a smoke screen as they leave.
They're leaving out of the battlefield, giving them the old Yankee Doodle-Doo, and leaving the battlefield. Look at that. Graceful.
I have to tell you that in my 6 years of being the President of the United States, I've never seen anything quite like this. This is a brand new level. But still, moving on from that and out of this clip, we are now going to be moving on a little bit further on down the line in Ukraine and towards Pokrovsk, where we also got one clip today showing a Russian T-72 covered in Contact 1 ERA tiles. I've never seen this many ERA tiles in my life. Ever. Like, they literally cover the whole roof of the turret with them. I don't know what the plan is here, but it looks like it didn't work because the tank was abandoned and damaged as well. So You know, I don't know what to say here. Nevertheless, wiretap them. But moving on from that and out of that area, we're now going to be moving on out of the Pokrovsk area and on up into Kyiv, because it is actually, crazily enough, time for us to cover some of the news out at Kyiv. But before we do, I want to make sure to get to this one last question here. After reports of the Kerch Bridge being hit, it appears the damage is minimal. That's why we actually didn't cover it today. There was literally so little damage, it wasn't really worth covering. But still, a lot of people are wondering, will Ukraine destroy it this year? There's only a few weeks left in this year, and if they don't manage to destroy it, then they'll never destroy it. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking, and what are you thinking as well?
So it looks like a whopping 50% of the audience said that Ukraine will destroy the Kerch Bridge by the end of the year, which is just in a couple of weeks, like the enforcer said, while 19% said yes, but not this year, and 15% said that Ukraine will not be destroying the bridge whatsoever. And I will be honest, in the few weeks of December that there are left, I doubt that Ukraine is going to be destroying that bridge. It's probably not going to be happening. And I know that Budanov said that he was going to be hitting it by the end of the year. And I think that's precisely the reason why they won't be hitting it by the end of the year, because he told them that was coming and they got prepared for it. And now the bridge is well protected by Russian air defense. So I think it's probably going to be destroyed eventually, but definitely not this year, at least in my opinion. So I'm with the 19%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be honest with you. Looking at the diplomatic situation across the board, I would have to say that the Ukrainians might not have the ability to hit the Kerch Bridge and cause any serious damage at this point. The Ukrainians really don't have the ability to strike at the bridge with the kind of precision that's required to sever a serious blow to the bridge. I would have to say that, in my honest opinion, I do not think that it's possible at this point. But nevertheless, we're now going to be moving on from the Kerch Bridge and on up into Kyiv to cover the speech from the president. And some people have to ask, is President Zelensky a crook? Well, he's not a crook. Let me on that. Yeah, without further ado, here is... Wait a minute. This is yesterday's speech. Oh, no. There's not a speech.
He doesn't have a speech? Come on, man. He gave us a minute yesterday. No speech today. What's happening, man?
He's not being generous to us. That face that Zelensky's making on screen is my face right now, seeing that there is no speech today and we got a 1 minute speech yesterday. Hang on, folks. Let me go see if I can find it. We have to save Ukraine at this point. We have to go find the speech. So hang on, folks. You got to be kidding me. There's not a damn speech today. There's not a damn one.
No.
Oh, my Lord. You don't understand. We used that segment to go pee and drink water, and now we can't pee and drink water. Oh, my Lord. Like, y'all do not even know. Usually I have to, like, get a little sip of water these days during the speech segment. Otherwise, I really, like, cannot vocally carry on into the next segment, because I've been talking nonstop for an hour and 40 minutes. And so it's really hard to do that without a sip of water. Because many of y'all know that I just talk endlessly. It's almost like it's like an endless audio track. That's why some people wonder if this is live or not, because it just sounds like I'm endlessly talking, like a YouTube video that has like 900 cuts in it, so that way it sounds like a continuous and endless sentence. But the thing with that is that I'm constantly sitting here and coming up with stuff to say nonstop every single second, and I'm doing it live. So I'd never get a chance to actually sip water most of the time. I'm just kind of sitting here and having to talk nonstop. So when we do not get that speech, we have to then go through like the whole like SpongeBob and Patrick and Sandy Cheeks dome, like shriveling up and dying and looking at the water pail and going, I don't need it. I don't need it. I need it. You know, that kind of a deal. Because beyond that, we get no water breaks or anything like that during the show. But anyways, with that in mind, it is time for us to move on into the second segment of the stream, where we do get to talk to all of y'all. And while I might not have any water in my gullet at the moment to really make that a lot easier, it's still an incredibly fun segment to do, and we absolutely love it and enjoy it every single second of the way. I got to thank everyone who's been watching tonight so far. We had 10.5 thousand people here at the peak, and about 54,000 people have watched so far before the second hour has even begun. We are entirely honored and grateful to have so many people come to this channel and consider it to be their primary source of news, even on things that aren't exactly Ukraine. We pretty much covered nothing but Syria tonight, which is a pretty big topic, albeit. But we're absolutely shocked and amazed that people consider this to be a major news channel to get news from on any topic around the world, regardless of what it is, due to the amount of information and analysis that we put into every single news segment. And so a huge thanks to all of y'all for watching so far, and please make sure to stick around, because we have loads of stuff to continue to talk about. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so it's now time for the final question segment of the night. And of course, we have our super chats to get to, no more polls to get to, but I do have a piece of news here that just came out from
Oh,
South Korea, that is. It looks like, speaking from the presidential palace in Seoul, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol issued an apology hours before a parliamentary vote on his impeachment for the unsuccessful attempt to impose martial law earlier this week. So he has formally apologized. So he's good to go now, folks. We should forgive him and forget and let him remain the president. Of course, that's really not the way it works, though. Like in reality, and I don't think that that's going to actually cut it. And in my opinion, obviously, I'm not a South Korean citizen. It's totally up to them. But if it was me and I was South Korean, I would want that guy out quickly because he seems like he's a danger and he's a loose cannon and apparently a nut. So he might have to go, but we'll have to wait and see how that impeachment vote goes. But he has apologized, so, I guess he's sorry. But Enforcer, what say you?
let me show you, Matthew, the Yoon Suk Yeol simulator. Let's throw a coup. Ah, shit, it failed. Hang on. Let's Microsoft.
Sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Microsoft Word. Let me go open up Microsoft Word. Blank document. Let's see. I don't know if you.
Wait. Let's do it. Let's do it like a real YouTube apology. By the way, listen, guys, I messed up.
No. Let me do it. I know how they do it these days, dude. Wait a minute. Hang on. You got to have that awkward silence. They got to walk into frame, sit down, give out the long sigh, and then go, I really didn't want to make this video. But yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly what they do. But really quickly, folks, hang on. Matthew, I don't even know if you can see this right now. Can you see what I'm doing? No, you can't. Let me shift it because we don't hear any audio from this point. So let me share my whole screen, the one that I'm on right now, so that way you can actually see this. So right now, all right, so we are Yoon Suk Yeol, everyone, and we just attempted a coup and it failed. So we have to get Old English. Let's see, Old English. Yeah, Old English text right here. There we go. We need to make this extra official. So let's see here. Dear people of the Republic of Korea. Yeah, that seems pretty good. All right, now we click enter. All right, and now we go back to Times New Roman. We still want it to look somewhat official. And then we bump the font down to 14. And then we think out something that's really deep and really well thought out. My bad. And then we move down 2 spots, signed, and then we put in our name, Yoon Suk Yeol. There we go. We're done.
And putting quotations below it for his title, not a dictator.
Wait, hang on. P.S. Hang on. P.S. Totally, seriously, like, no joke, for real, not a dictator.
I was just capping.
Tee-hee. I was only capping on God. There we go. That ought to do it.
Oh, but seriously though, like this pretty much brings it down to the level of what this actually is. You can't just simply say my bad and keep going about your business after trying to pull a coup. Like that doesn't work like that. This guy, actually, I don't know much about Yoon, but he sounds like he could be a little crazy. Like him coming out and not resigning immediately and trying to apologize and stay in office. He sounds like he might have a couple of screws loose.
Signed Loon Suk Yeol. Like he's not Yoon Suk Yeol anymore. He's a damn loon. Man, that's why. Hang on. Better yet, man. Dear people of Korea, why you mad is only prank. Signed Loon Suk Yeol. Like do something like that next. Oh man,
it's only a prank, bro. It's only a prank,
dude. It's just a prank, dude. That's honestly what he did at this point, just giving out an apology. It's like, oh, hey, by the way, everyone, I'm so sorry I tried to overthrow the government and completely throw out the will of the people. Like, my bad. I guess that happens. It's like, no, that doesn't happen, man. Like, you just tried to overthrow the whole government. This isn't something you come back from. You've got to resign. Like, that's just how it works at this point. And then there's still going to be, some punitive damages after that. You'll probably go to prison. It's like, that's just how it works. I would have to say, in my honest opinion, folks, this guy is crazy. He's got to be crazy. I think he's living in another reality at this point. I think he's in denial about how badly that actually went, and he's thinking that the political situation is recoverable, which he just simply is not at this point. He has lost his entire party in the government, not speaking on politics here, but he's lost his whole party. the National Assembly and the office of the president will never work side by side from this point forward while he remains in office. So for the good of the Republic of Korea, he ought to resign. That would just be the most sensible move at this moment, because there's no way that South Korea can move forward in this very tumultuous and turbulent time in foreign affairs with the National Assembly and the president on two different wavelengths, and largely the National Assembly, the entirety of it, resenting him the entire time he's in office. It just cannot work from this point forward. But anyways,
You know what will be wild is if they actually do not have enough votes to impeach him, which honestly I have a feeling that he will be impeached. I think they probably have enough support for that because there's pretty much, I think it's pretty much unanimous at this point. People realize how bad it is what he actually just pulled off, like essentially a coup. And if he could have gotten away with it without some backlash, I think he would have gone all the way through if the military would have listened to him. So I think they're going to probably impeach him, but if he doesn't get impeached, though, by some fluke, that will be an interesting situation. He'll be remaining there, and they'll have to be forced to work with him in the future. So, that'll be curious to see how that goes. But I think the impeachment is still set for, I think, December the 8th, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe Monday or something like that. So we'll be
dang, we're
finding
gonna
out
be
pretty
off
soon.
air. We're gonna be off air when he gets impeached.
Man, if it's something big, we might have to run a stream on that one.
Dude, I think some even crazier stuff's gonna happen, like when he gets impeached. Like he's gonna be brought in front of the National Assembly or something. They're gonna be like, "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" And he's gonna be like, "People of Korea, I'm sorry. I know I was a big poo-poo head, but I'm sorry. And I love you guys." It's gonna be something crazy. We're gonna have to probably be live for that. We're going to get a whole 2 weeks on air. Like, we're always working, but we're going to get a whole 2 weeks on air with no breaks, because I think we're going to have to be here for his impeachment. Like, if that's something that's live or televised or anything like that, we're going to have to be here for it and talk about it, because that's going to be wild to watch if he unanimously gets impeached, which he might actually end up getting unanimously impeached, at least at the moment. But
Also, Melanie said in the live chat, said, not an expert, but countries like South Korea, Japan, and perhaps others in Asia, a public apology is extremely powerful. We laugh, but criminal charges can go away from a public apology. Now, I will say, like, respect is a very, very big deal in Asian culture, typically. That's a very big component of it, but this is a much different situation because this guy right here pulled a coup, and I've never seen that really happen in modern history, and obviously it hadn't happened for decades in South Korea, so I don't think the apology in this case is going to cut it. The MPs are going to pretty much think, well, he apologized because he realizes he really did something stupid, but he's liable to do it again because there's rumors that he was going to pull it off again when the impeachment vote comes around, and that's still a real possibility. So his words may mean nothing. And I think the MPs understand that, and they need to get him out of there because the risk of him doing that again, now that he's done it the first time, is massive. So I don't think the apology is going to cut it, irrespective of the culture or anything like that.
man, there's no apology he can give. The only apology that he could do is, "And now, a word from the president. Good evening. This is the 37th time I've spoken to you from this office, where so many decisions have been made to shape the history of this nation." And then start going through the whole resignation process. Like, that's the only apology he can give at this point. I mean, people would probably respect him, I don't know, maybe an inkling if he resigned. But at this point, like, there's no way that you can just go, "I was going to overthrow your will nationally, my bad," and then just have that happen. Like, there's going to be no respect from that point forward, in my opinion.
And also no trust either. No respect or trust.
Yeah, because while the cultures are very different and apologies do get far in Asian cultures, government works almost the same way, especially democratic governments like that, on every level. They're really not different. The way that things are perceived emotionally, if you want to call it that, or even calculated wise in America is the same way they're going to be interpreted in South Korea. And what this guy did is he just attempted to overthrow the government. There's no way that you can go, "My bad, guys," like no hard feelings, right? And then just get away with that, because the National Assembly will never trust him from this point forward, and he could easily try this again in a couple of months' time. So they're going to want him gone. Even if he does apologize, even if the public somehow started to feel sympathetic for him, they're going to want him gone. So I do not think that he's going to be remaining. And I don't think this guy is a calculating guy. He's got to be stupid at this point, because if he sat down and considered his options, he would know that the only option he has is to resign and then hope that they have mercy on him and they don't end up putting him in prison. That's all he has. Like, the military is not loyal to him anymore, quite obviously. He apparently has no ambition to try and attempt it again, because it appears that the military is now disloyal to him and will not follow his orders, the National Assembly has all the cards. He has none. He doesn't have a card left to play. So if he had any brains in him, he would resign. That's the only thing he can do at this point. And also, I'm not saying, and I gotta say this, because some people are going to be talking about the internal politics of Korea. I'm not saying that from a political perspective, if I don't like this guy's political views. I could care less about his political views. Talking in a political life or a political career like that, he only has one option: to kind of preserve some dignity instead of just completely destroying it and then also leaving a really bad precedent in modern South Korean politics, is to resign. If he doesn't resign, he's showing that other people can do this and possibly get away with it. And also, if he resigns, he is also able to at least restore a little bit of his credibility in the future and maybe rebuild it. If he doesn't resign, he ends up being dishonored through getting impeached and removed from office by the National Assembly. He has destroyed himself. He may as well have been dead already. And so I hope that gives my opinion on that. But with that, I do understand, Andy, that we have some questions to answer.
So you would understand it very, very well. And also, let's see. Someone said, "You're incredibly ignorant of Asian cultures." Well, thank you very much, Mr. James Thompson, for that. But anyways, moving on here to our Super Chat segment here, our last segment of the stream, the long-lasting segment. Our first Super Chat goes to Ari Sowini,
Kiwi
who
Wife
puts
and
in a
Finn.
$50 donation. That is Kiwi Wife and Finn. And thank you very much, Ari, for throwing in that massive $50 support and helping to keep the channel running. And Ari says, "I appreciate the channel. Keep it going. LSA, make Russia small again, and F Putin."
Hey, thanks so much for support, Ari Sawini, Kiwi Wife and Finn, and thank you so much for appreciating the channel and supporting it and helping it to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like you, where would we be? We wouldn't be here right now. And I gotta thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. We wouldn't be able to make this thing a reality every single day and keep it running. And so I gotta thank you massively once again for appreciating this channel and giving us some kind words and encouragement to keep it going, as well as support, because every single bit of that is important. The kind words are as important as the support itself. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. Make Russia small again, and screw Putin. And really screw the entire axis, including Iran and China, and everyone else involved as well. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right.
Also, wait, hang on. Before we move on, though, I do have to say this. I'm seeing some people, man. I don't know what it is. I'm about to have to get really serious with this one tonight. Some people, for some reason, are giving lip. I don't know if you're seeing it, where people are wanting to tell us you need to move on or do this. I just got to make this very clear. We're very happy to have people here. We love to have folks here, and we hope that everyone's enjoying the show. However, it is very rude and disrespectful to start dictating to us how we run the show. I work 70 hours a week on air and off air to make this show possible, and we will run this show however we run it. If people are here and enjoy it, then that's great. We are open to input, of course, but we are not open to input where people are going to start attempting to dictate to us in the chat if they don't like something and they want us to move on. So I want to make that a little bit more clear, because I don't know what it is with some folks constantly going out of their way to kind of, try and for some reason act like they can tell us what to do. It's incredibly rude, because I wouldn't tell y'all what to do at your job, unless if I was paying you, and then I probably would, because I'm paying you to do something. But nevertheless, only Anthony can tell us what to do on this channel, okay? I don't understand if y'all get that. But that is still fairly rude. Just want to put that out there to give a little bit of amnesty. The general trend is that we ban people who do that. But considering that I'm seeing a lot of people who may not understand that this is also the question segment, so we can literally just ramble with y'all about anything for like 30 minutes, and it's fine. So if you don't like it, you can click off and go to another channel or something along those lines. Look, I'm not Jaguar, and I'm not going to rebrand the whole channel and then tell y'all if y'all don't like it, don't buy it and do that. But this is what we've been doing for 3 years. So if you don't like it and you're new to the channel, go find another one. There's plenty of them that cry and whine like babies that you'll probably enjoy a lot more than this one. And if you don't want to hear about Syria, there's a million other channels that are not talking about Syria. So
You're here. Let's hear.
Here. I hope I addressed that incredibly well, because I know that everyone likes to beat up on Nixon, but I'm telling you something. I won't be around to beat up any longer. Oh man, I don't know why I'm turning into Rodney Dangerfield there, but anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on here to our next super chats, we have one from Dennis Higgins who puts in a 20, and also Trister1 that puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, Trister and Dennis, two longtime channel legends of the LSA, throwing in that $40 support, and we appreciate it, of course. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support to each and every single one of you. You didn't throw in comments, but the support is massively appreciated. I gotta thank Trister1, Dennis Higgins, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so a big thanks to both of y'all once again. And with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also Leor Avigal said, "Who is Anthony? I forgot who he is." Surprisingly, people have not forgotten Anthony. I think we roasted him so bad that it ingrained it in people's memories. But Anthony showed up and said something along the lines of, "I don't like this. I don't want to hear it, and move on, and dang it." And he went off in the live chat, and we banned him for it. And we went on a roasting campaign against Anthony for doing that. And I think Anthony actually reappeared at one point in the live chat, and then he got banned again, if I'm not mistaken. But he was a character.
Anthony Studebaker will never be forgotten on this channel. He went the way of Studebaker, down and out. But let me go bring this up. By the way, don't know if a lot of people remember this, but Studebaker was an automotive company at a time. I believe it is defunct as of 1968. Man, rip to Studebaker. Studebaker was a legend. You know what the kind of vehicles they produced, man? They used to produce the Studebaker Speedster.
I like that a little bit. It's a 1916, so I'll let it pass.
Man, the Studebaker Touring.
Yo, did I just see the Lehman Brothers in that article? Go back for a second.
What?
It
Yeah.
said the financing was handled. Oh, dear Lord. The financing was handled by the Lehman Brothers. Is this why they went under?
Probably. I would assume. Like, I
The
would think.
Lehman Brothers. They fixed Studebaker up.
Dude, this is what Studebakers look like in the 30s? I feel like
Oh,
this
that's not too
design was
bad
getting a
looking,
little
actually. I
old.
would like that.
Well, yeah, it's good. I think it's great looking, but it's like it's kind of getting a little old for the 30s. You know, like you would think this would be like a mid-20s kind of a thing. And like here's a let's see, a UK imported right-hand drive Studebaker four-door. See, that's what you kind of think of when you think of the 30s. You think of cars like these, not this. Like this is really 1920s, not 1930s. Oh my lord, dude, Studebaker buses were interesting.
Yeah, they're actually kind of ugly, actually. I don't really like the Studebaker buses. Their cars don't look too bad, though.
Yeah. Oh, look, a Studebaker Champion. I've seen loads of these things.
Hey, that's that car. Was this the racing car that was in Cars?
No, that was a Hudson of some sort.
Oh, okay.
But that's not that bad looking though. Honestly, like you know, there's been a lot worse out there. What else did they make? I've seen this one before as well. I believe this is when they started to go under because the car designs weren't really catching on. This is really when they started to go under, is when they started doing stupid stuff like this with the front. The 1960 Studebaker Lark 8. Now we can see why Studebaker died. Oh my god.
Damn. And also, at some point, it merged with Packard. Like, go back and see when the merger was, because it looks like the design went bad after Packard, maybe. Let's see here. It says merger with Packard right here in the middle. It says it was losing money in 1954, and it negotiated a takeover by Packard, and it looks like it did worse. So Packard apparently helped take it under.
Well, Packard wasn't that bad of a company. Packard was a very interesting company, actually. They made some pretty nice stuff, like this, the Packard Ford series. I mean, that looks not that bad, in my opinion, at least. But there was also a couple of others, like the 9 Series Deluxe, which is like the Al Capone gangster car.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah,
you know somebody that makes really good cars, obviously not American, but Mercedes of that time period. They made some really cool looking stuff. Like now, obviously during the time period, there were some very interesting things happening with Mercedes production, but it was cool looking cars at least.
Yeah, that's something, you know. Also, this is not a bad looking Packard either. But they all started to go under around that time, and then they just went completely under afterwards. And it's really kind of sad because there were so many American car companies that used to exist up until about the 60s and the 70s, and then a lot of them just ended up getting killed off, largely by foreign competition and also just because of the market and people not liking their designs. But Packard was such a good company, at least at the beginning. Their entire marketing was not done through like marketing campaigns like Ford or Chrysler or Dodge. Their literal marketing slogan was you want to know how good a Packard is? Ask the man that owns one. Like, that was their whole thing, is that they were so good that people who own Packards would be like, dude, it's a great car, you got to get one. And then that started to slide after World War II, and then it really went down, and that's why they merged here with Studebaker, and then they went under together. Kind of like Penn Central did when Pennsylvania Railroad and New York Central merged together, which was a stupid idea. Like, when you just look at that on the base level, it was a really stupid idea, and then it ended up being the biggest bankruptcy in American history up to that point when it caved in and went under. But beyond that, Mercedes was a fairly interesting company at the time. Speaking of something outside of the United States. Now, I'm not really a big fan of Mercedes nowadays. Like, Mercedes, it kind of like blends in with any other, honestly, in my opinion. But let me see if I can show you some of the historical cars where, like this one.
Yes, the Mercedes Simplex.
That was very simple looking. But let's see here. Wait, hang on. Huh, so this was their logo from 1930 to 1989. Huh. What do you know? It was this one.
Yeah, still their logo, actually. They just added some words to it.
Yeah, right here. Well, actually, they added a little bit of extra detail to it, too. I'll be honest with you, though. Out of all of them, I think the coolest looking one is this one.
Yeah, that one's pretty cool. I like that one.
Yeah, that one's pretty cool. This one's also pretty neat. This one was probably the most bland ever. And let's see. This was also just kind of neat looking, too, just having Mercedes. Like, that was not bad either. But let's see here. Formula E, Motorsport. We don't care about the Motorsport. I want to know about the historical vehicles that were made by Mercedes. So let's see here. Significant models produced. Wow, that actually is really nice. The SSK?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the SSK is nice. Also, there was the first, I can't remember the model name. It's that model Mercedes I have. I can't remember what it's called. It's the Mercedes 300, I think, SL. I think that's the one, maybe. That's a pretty nice looking
This one, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And there's also a racing version as well. The racing version of this car is the most expensive car ever sold at auction in the history of cars. I think it sold for I can't remember, several million or something like that. I think it was actually up in the tens of millions. It was crazy how much it sold for, which is absurd. But that's a very collectible car right there, very rare.
Yeah, that is.
There it was. It was a 300 SLR Unlauten coupe.
It wasn't on this article?
Yeah, it's over there in production. You see on the production list on the right side, it says 300 SLR Unlauten coupe.
Yeah, here we go. This one.
Yeah, that's it. This one right here is the most expensive car ever sold.
Dude, that thing honestly does look incredibly cool.
Oh, it sounded so good too. Like I've seen a video of it driving. Like whoever bought one of them actually drove it around, and that thing is crazy. It spits flames out the side of the exhaust over there on the right side.
Man, that would be honestly sick to see in person if we ever got the chance. But let's see here. 1939, they made the 320A. Huh, that's interesting. Oh, there's an interesting gap here, though, in interesting vehicles that were made by Mercedes in between 1939 and 1951. I wonder what happened during that time. I guess it doesn't matter. It probably is nothing important. But let's see. The C111. Ew! Oh my god, this is the dark ages here.
It's like a DeLorean.
It does, doesn't it? This is hideous. This is like the Pontiac Aztec or something. This is a low for Mercedes. So what did they make after that? Okay, that's not really that good. I'm not going to lie, man. I think they were having a tough time for a while.
Wait a minute. They didn't make the S-Class in 1965. That's a lie.
Maybe they made the first of the S-Class? Oh, well, I guess this is the first of the S-Class, I guess. I mean, maybe,
Yeah, that is. That other one's not, though. That other one was like a 2019 or a 2020.
Dude, isn't this what the Stasi used to chase people down in East Germany, was a car like this?
I think pretty much every special services had this car as their fleet vehicle.
I think so, man. For some reason, I swear. Because, Mercedes didn't sell into East Germany. East Germany had their own car companies. But I swear that the East German Stasis had cars that looked like these. Pretty much almost identical. But, yeah, Mercedes is an interesting company. Now, you know a company that used to have a lot about it that just completely fell off, and I don't think it'll ever recover? Kind of I think Jaguar is going to go that way, or Jaguar, whichever way you pronounce it these days, is Cadillac. Cadillac used to be a proper company. Nowadays, it's kind of mid, but they made some really cool cars back in the day. Look at all of these first cars ever made in America. This was one of their first ones from 1902.
That's pretty cool. I like that. That's definitely not a Cadillac I'm familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, like, look at these things. It's pretty neat to think they were like one of the first car manufacturers in America. And for a while, they actually kept up with the Well, actually, they didn't keep up with the competition. They were the luxury car company of America. Like, look at this Cadillac Suburban.
That's an interesting turn of events. That's like a mixture between Chevrolet and Cadillac right there. A Cadillac Suburban.
Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? But you know something else about this thing? It almost looks like a mix of a stagecoach and a car.
Yeah, it kind of does. It looks like it'd be really nice on the inside of it.
Yeah, it really does, actually. But they made so many nice ones. Like, look at this one, the Cadillac Phaeton.
Yeah, they all kind of look the same. Like when they're of this like type model right here. Like pretty much every car company in America made them look the same.
I don't know about this one though.
No, I don't like that. It's like a hearse.
Dude, that would be the perfect one for mobsters, though, man. You whip around the corner in the hearse, spray him down with a
Yeah.
Tommy gun. Like that's a great one for gangsters, not really for anyone else. I don't know what they were doing pre-war. Like they started to get a little bit weird. But also these right here, I think these are great.
Yeah, those are pretty neat. I personally would not have had one, but they are pretty neat.
But let's see here. I want to see if I can show y'all some of the other. You know, they just completely glossed over the 50s here, didn't they, Matthew? They're like, yeah, they did tail fins, and that was it. And it's like, well, what else? What other car models? Like, you get into the 70s, and they're wanting to show you all of them, like the Cadillac DeVilles. Many people would know this as your local trap house whip, nowadays. But back in the day, this was the peak of luxury right here. This was it. That's why they're the whip for the trap houses these days, because in the 70s, they were the peak of luxury. And they really were. Like, when you go back and, like, Doug DeMuro, who's on YouTube, did a video on one of the Cadillac DeVilles, and it actually was super nice on the inside, especially for the time. They had all kinds of features in them that you would only see in cars that would commonly be seen in the 90s. It was really ahead of its time. And also the Eldorado is pretty cool too. But I don't know, like at this point, I feel like this is the point where they started to lose a lot of their prestige and kind of, started having to duke it out with everyone else in like the common market, because then you went from really cool stuff like they had in the 20s and the 50s and the 60s and maybe the 70s, and then you start getting crap like this.
Yeah, I don't like this junk. And whoever the hell painted that like brand name on the tire, like shame on them for doing that. This is not the car you do that on. That's for racing cars. It's not for street vehicles.
This one actually didn't look that bad. I don't know why you would think a vampire would drive this thing though, with how it looks. Like, someone's gonna roll down the window and say, "Hey, lady, blah 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 blah. How much is it an hour?" Something like that. In New York City, it's like, "Hey, look, you get away from me, you creep." But yeah, from then on, Cadillac just got worse. Like the Cadillac Escalade.
Oh no, not the Escalade. Like honestly though, like the Escalade and like the modern one, it looks pretty nice, but I don't know. I'm just not a fan of Cadillac. Like overall, there's something about Cadillac I just don't like.
I don't know. I feel like they just lost a lot of that aura about them, that they used to have, because they used to be a luxury car company, and now they've whittled themselves down to just being any other car company, and then the designs really aren't that impressive. So then it is what it is. And it's like that's just kind of lame. Like it's like I don't really like Cadillac for that reason. It's like they should have kept with what they were, which was a luxury car company, and just figured out how to battle it out or die with dignity. That's what they should have done. But instead, they like sold out. They went into like crappy car designs. Another company that I just don't really like these days anymore is Chrysler, which Chrysler is rough. Like the cars they make nowadays, I just don't really like them. But you know what? Let me skip Chrysler because they don't really have a lot of pictures of their cars here to easily get. One company that I hate is Jeep. I hate Jeep now. Like Jeep was cool back when Jeep was Jeep. But Jeeps aren't Jeeps anymore. Like this, well, that's not really the real Jeep. Like this is a Bantam Jeep. And you would see some of these in World War II, but they were honestly ugly. The real ones they were looking for were the ones I believe made by GWP. And let me see if I'm getting that correct. Let's see. Damn. Let's see. Oh yeah, Willys Overland is the ones that you really want to find. I think they were called GWPs. But then the Bantam Car Company. No, don't ever look at the Bantams with like any kind of pride. Here we go. This is the four GPWs. These are the Willys Jeeps that everyone would know. These were cool. Like they were little like ATVs nearly. They could go anywhere and do anything. And they still hold up nowadays pretty decently if you ever get one. They're just overpriced as hell though. They're like 40 grand. But I've heard that a lot of people who have them generally like them and they think they're really cool. But nowadays the kind of line of stuff that they make, it's just not good. Like let's get to the modern day here. And let's look at some. Ew. Ew.
Yeah, that's just Jeep right there.
Yeah.
You know, the problem with the modern Jeep, this is the main problem. A lot of people will still actually buy the Jeep Wranglers and stuff like that because Jeep Wranglers are still pretty cool, but they're overpriced as hell. And the parent company, Stellantis, which actually, I believe Chrysler's a part of that, Dodge is a part of it, Jeep is, and I believe there's one other, but I can't think of it right off the top of my head. Overall, not a very good car group.
Yeah, it's not a good car group. It's just not that good. I don't know. I just don't like any other designs. Also, like, look at this. Like, this doesn't even look like an off-road, go anywhere, do anything kind of a vehicle. This is just like a soccer mom car at this point. You know, it's not like unique. It's like just trying to like battle it out and the average kind of like selling points in the market these days for cars. It's not unique. It doesn't really stand out. It isn't original. It's just kind of blending in with everything else. And I also think the grill is ugly on this thing. It looks like a gator, like you know, like a gator ATV. And I remember when gators used to be big, man. Now like everything but a gator is big. But I remember when gators were like the first ATVs, and these things have a grill like a gator. And let me go see if I can find one of those, because I don't even think people like talk about the gators much. Gator ATV. Well, did they just like erase this from memory? Matthew, what would I pull up to find the gator?
John Deere Gator.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, there we go. That would be it. The John Deere Gator. Yeah, here we go. Not that one. We want to find. So they have every one but the one I'm thinking about. Like on this
You're
thing.
talking lawn care version of the Gator.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you'll have to pull that one up separate because I don't see it here.
Yeah, I don't see it either. Let me go pull it up. The John Deere Lawn Gator. Man, they've really changed up the appearance of that thing, man, over time. Good lord. None of them look at all. Oh, here we go. Well, here's one, kind of, sort of, that I'm talking about. This one.
Yeah, that's it. That's the traditional one. There's the other one down there as well, the six-wheeled one.
Yeah, these are really cool. Man, these things kind of look like Ket and Trads, honestly. Like, I think they're really neat. But, yeah, I don't know. Like, this thing, well, hang on, let me go back and get the Jeep Cherokee thing. Hang on, y'all. I gotta scroll all the way down here and get it. This thing has a grill that kind of looks like a Gator's grill. Like, that's the issue with it, is that it almost looks like a toy instead of a real car. And then it's in an SUV at that. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I just don't like them. I think they're not great. I feel like a lot of American car companies have really started to get on down there. Like, they're just not good. That's why people go for foreign car companies. I wish that American car companies would make cars that were as highly sought after and as cool as foreign cars. That's not like a subjective thing. I think that's a fact, because whenever you go around, all of the American car companies are almost conglomerates at this point, or like Jeep, Chrysler, and everyone else is in one building, and then you'll have just a Mercedes lot because they have enough sales to constitute having their own building. But then all of the American companies are so unoriginal that they all have to like battle together just to have a slot, just a slice of the market. But anyways, with that, we are now going to be moving on to the next one. But I hope we were able to talk about cars, which we never do. But Matthew, what do we got for the next one?
All right, so moving on here to our next super chat question. This one goes to Ogre Online, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Ogre Online, for that support. He said the fact that Putin was even still supporting Syria while attacking Ukraine, who's backed up by the US and Europe, shows how maybe not smart he is. And also, Russian logistics will be the reason they have to attack Kyiv with ICBM.
Oh, yeah, and I would agree. The Russians really are stupid. I don't know why people ever thought that Putin was a calculating genius, because everything that Putin's ever done has shown that he isn't really a calculating genius. The Russian economy has never grown under Putin tremendously. Let me go get the GDP stats. There. So it grew rapidly, kind of like everyone's economy was doing at the beginning of the 2000s, which is, well, 2000 was the year he became president. So it went from 260 billion to about 1.6, and from 2008 onwards, the economy has never really grown. It's just kind of stagnated. It's like, that's not a wise leader. He's had about over 15 years to actually make the economy get into an improvable position, and he continues to put Russia in such bad positions that it never can improve in that way. The GDP per capita is incredibly small. It's practically non-existent. It's a horrendous place. Like, it's just not a good place. And like, being a wise leader, leader, or if you want to claim to be a wise leader, that's not just about having a strong military and knowing how to work in foreign policy. There's a lot of domestic issues that are involved in that as well, and trying to make sure that your country is economically viable and successful. That's a big part of being a leader, and there's just none of that in Russia. You can just look around and see it for yourself. It's a terrible country. He's not a good leader. And I don't know why people still entertain the idea that Putin is this kind of a grand mastermind and a real sage of some sort of knowledge. He's not. He's a stupid guy. Like, he makes no sense. The stuff he says is really stupid. It's not founded in reality. He lives in a fake world. He's surrounded by yes men. He executes his political opponents. And if someone was truly so good of a leader, why in the world do they have to execute their political opponents? Shouldn't they be able to win on the merits of what they say alone instead of having to kill the people who are opposing them? It shows that their actual, real qualities are so weak that there really is no way for them to stay in power unless if they kill the competition. So I would agree. Putin is a pretty stupid guy, and I would say that this is just another feather in the hat showing that the guy is as stupid as I say he is, at least. But there's still a lot of people out there who think he's just the real deal. And you know what's crazy is that now there's a whole bunch of people out there talking about Lavrov because of that Tucker Carlson interview, and they're acting like Lavrov is the real deal too. Like, oh, Lavrov told it straight to the Americans. This guy who's literally the foreign minister of Russia and is looking out for Russian interests, he told America how it's like in their own country, and he was really spitting facts, like just straight up info. It's like, oh, come on, you'd have to be gullible to believe that one. And there are people who believe it, and I'd like, not a lot, I am hoping, but there are some, and it's always sad to see it. Like, it's like, if anyone's going to lie to you, it would be the Russians or the Chinese. Why in the world would you believe anything that they would say? Like, they're always going to undermine the American government. They're always going to undermine the position of the United States in the world, make you think that America's weak and feeble and stupid and can't do anything. That's what they do. That's their job, to make you think that. They want Americans to think they're weak, and they want Americans to think that they should rise up and create civil unrest in the country. That's what they do. It's like, if you listen to that, you're literally drinking the Russian and Chinese Kool-Aid. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that well. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to GunFox61, who's, of course, a longtime channel legend who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, GunFox, for supporting the channel once again. Hey. And he says, December 7th, 1941, the Empire of Japan attacks the U.S. in Hawaii and Guam, Wake Island, and the Philippines. And the USS Arizona, the BB-39, USS Oklahoma, BB-37, were lost. And this attack brought the U.S. into the Second World War 83 years ago. And question from the chat.
And I thank you so much for the support, GunFox61. And just in a little bit of time, actually in about 40 minutes in our time zone, it will be D-Day. Well, not D-Day. I just said that so wrong. Correction. Scratch that. Y'all never heard that. It's going to be Pearl Harbor, because D-Day is June 6th. I don't know what in my head made me say D-Day. I have no clue. I'm going to have to be like Yoon Suk Yeol now. My bad. Signed the enforcer. But beyond that, it is almost about to be Pearl Harbor Day, which is a pretty interesting thing, because the USS Arizona is still there to this day. What a lot of people never really heard about Pearl Harbor is that a lot of the battleships that were sunk actually were salvageable. And so they ended up refloating them and then repairing them and putting them back into service. The Japanese were blown away when they saw that too, because they swore that they destroyed these battleships in Pearl Harbor, but pretty much every single one of them was pushed back into service after they had been repaired, except for the USS Arizona and I believe the USS Utah over here. The USS Utah rolled over onto its side so severely there was no way to really lift it back up. I think they tried to and they failed, so they just left it where it was. The USS Utah is a little bit understated because not as many people died on the Utah as they did on the Arizona, but you can still see a little bit of the superstructure just kind of poking up over the tide right there. Which is wild. It's a little bit kind of eerie, actually. But the USS Arizona is the more famously known one because about half of everyone who died in the attack at Pearl Harbor was on board the USS Arizona. What happened? No one really knows exactly what happened with the Arizona, but a Japanese bomb or a torpedo struck the ship so violently at one of the powder magazines, the powder magazine actually detonated and pretty much destroyed the whole front half of the ship. That's why a bit of the bow exists up here, and then nothing exists from the bow all the way up to where the bridge would have been at the time. Both of the turrets, I believe, were blown off of the ship. The entire fore area of the ship was also destroyed as well, except for the very front of the bow. and it went down in minutes. No one really had a chance to get out, and that's why so many people died on board the vessel when it went down. But it is really crazy to think that at this site in Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, that's what forced the United States into World War II and really shaped the course of history all the way up until the day we're talking right now. This was as influential as a day as November 11th of 1918, which was the armistice for World War I that then led to the Treaty of Versailles. But it's a really wild thing. And what's even crazier is that Battleship Row is still here, because these little things right here, you see them right here, the little concrete things, these are actually the moorings for the battleships that were on Battleship Row. They are still here to this day in every single spot that they were at during Pearl Harbor. And so when you pass through Pearl Harbor, or when you look at Pearl Harbor, the remnants of that attack are still there. And the places that a lot of those battleships and some, I believe, a few cruisers went down are still there. You can literally see exactly where they were moored when they were hit. So a really crazy thing, and once again, a very important and influential day in American history that kind of gets forgotten these days because of other things like 9/11, which really is more so in the public memory than Pearl Harbor. And Pearl Harbor was as big of a day as 9/11 was, at least in terms of how American history has unfolded. Also, the battleship Missouri is here as well as a museum ship, which is also really cool because the Missouri is an Iowa-class battleship, and people have a special place in their American hearts for the Iowa-class battleships. They are a pride of the American fleet, even to this day, which is pretty cool when you think about it. But still, I hope that addresses that the best I can. Thank you so much once again for support, Gunfox61, and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And also, I think I just saw someone say that America is imperialist. Man, they're about to turn into Kim Jong-un. They're about to go, man, those wicked American imperialists. It's like, man, we ain't no imperialists, but you better stop speaking like that, though, or we'll come over to you and we'll install a new government that's supporting American interests. Only in your best interest.
New government. Well, can I interest you with a free new government with a low monthly installments, a low interest rate, 97-month financing, 30% interest.
Can I interest you in a government overthrow? Because we'll do it. We'll do it again. But still, I hope that is addressed that well. Thank you once again for the support, Gunfox61, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Jenna, last name Tolls, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Jenna, last name Tolls, for that support. They said, emergency alert. I'm out of name ideas.
Oh no. Like, dang. Well, I thank you for the support. And hey, it's fine. Sometimes you get us with those names. We just have to end up censoring it anyways. I'm not going to lie. Jenna, last name Tolls. But still, thank you so much for the support to help this channel to keep on running, because you have been a source of loads of comedy on this channel for quite a while with the jokes that you've been throwing in. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Danny B, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Danny B, for that support once again. And he says, good evening, enforcers, my friends. How accurate is that movie 12 Strong?
And let me see. I've never watched the movie myself. Let's see. This is the movie that came out in 2018. Huh.
What's it about?
So, the plot. It's a U.S. Army captain with the Green Berets Operational Detachment Alpha, moving into a new home with his wife and daughter on September 11th, 2001. He received an assignment duty, flown in, let's see, the country's fourth largest city, stronghold of the Taliban. Let's see here. I would not know personally. I don't know the story too well. Unfortunately, I've never really been one to watch movies, and especially now over the past few years, I've never really been able to have a lot of time to watch movies, so I wouldn't be able to tell you if the movie is accurate or not. Usually, though, with movies, I usually lean towards them being generally inaccurate. Movies don't really represent, well, what happens in the real world, and that's what's crazy, is that a lot of folks consider movies to be a better source of info than video games, like as far as media consumption goes, which I always find so weird, because I feel like people actually get a lot more of a better idea of what war is like through a game like Squad than you would ever get through a movie. Like, movies are just wildly inaccurate almost in every single way, with the pacing that happens, with the events that unfold. Like, there's been very few series that appear to be largely accurate to the historical information. Like, for example, the HBO miniseries Chernobyl, which was fairly accurate to the source info about what happened at Chernobyl, but even still, they had to take creative liberties, like turning the entire teams of scientists that were involved in that, which I believe were hundreds of them, down to just two, the main character and also the woman scientist who was supposed to represent all of the scientists in the movie. Creative liberties, well, in the miniseries, creative liberties had to be made. And in Hollywood, especially when going with war movies, a lot of creative liberties are made, an insane amount of them, especially ones that involve any kind of internal squabbles. Internal squabbles in the military do happen, but Hollywood will blow them out of proportion to make you think that the military is like a wild and lawless place where you can just get up on your lieutenant and start slamming him around on the wall and get in a fist fight with him, and there's no consequences. Like, you wouldn't get, Article 15 for that, or court-martialed for that, or something along those lines, which would happen. And they really dramatize things, or maybe even sometimes greatly exaggerate things. And also, not to say this as like a general thing, but the few movies that I watched, which was, let's see, American Sniper and The Lone Warrior, The Lone Soldier, from what I remember, at least afterwards, and this isn't me saying, this is what everyone said, a lot of people who were involved said that The Lone Survivor was largely a fabrication because the guy who wrote the book didn't even go through any of that, and even some of the locals were interviewed later that actually dealt with him and said that it was not at all like that in real life, that what he represented the story to be. And then the American Sniper, Chris Kyle, got mired in controversy because he got sued. He actually got sued by someone for, I believe it was defamation, because he completely lied about even having an encounter with him and then beating him up, which did not happen. So the guy who was in the story sued him and won, because there was apparently no proof that actually happened. And then there was a load of other things in the story that apparently were greatly exaggerated. Not to say that that's every single story. There are a lot of true stories. Like, for example, let's see, I forgot the name of the book, but the book by E.B. Sledge about his time in the Pacific, very accurate book, but it was written by a grunt. And not to disparage, of course, I do not mean to disparage anyone when I talk about stuff like this, but books that are written that become very popular that come out of the Special Forces, generally, from what I've understood the rule to be, some of them have a great deal of exaggeration in them than one would expect. Usually the books written by your rank and file soldiers in the Marines and the Army, those are usually very accurate books because they're more so trying to tell their life experiences. Sometimes, in some instances, at least the instances I know of, which is the American Sniper and the Lone Survivor, those stories were greatly exaggerated by the authors of those books to try and sell copies and also kind of trump up their time in the forces. So I hope that kind of addresses that fairly well without knowing that movie. I would generally lean towards it's probably somewhat accurate, of course taking some artistic and creative liberties to make sure the timing and pacing in the story is interesting, but at the same time, there probably is some things that may be slightly exaggerated in there, but I wouldn't know because I don't know the exact story. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, a lot of people are saying that Black Hawk Down was very close to the book. I actually did read the book that Black Hawk Down was based off of. I would have to agree that was very close to the real deal of what the book represented. Of course, some creative liberties were taken. Movies will always do that. But that was very close to the actual source material. Another thing that was very close in just one part of the movie was Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan is a fictional story, just for everyone to know. But the interesting thing about it is that apparently the actual D-Day landing scenes at the very beginning of the movie are so realistic to the original D-Day landings that D-Day veterans, U.S. veterans that were at D-Day who watched the movie actually ended up going into PTSD fits in the theater because the scenes were so accurate to what the beach was like in real life, which is a pretty wild thing to think that movie got down to a T. And also a lot of veterans who watched the movie Dunkirk, which Dunkirk really wasn't substantive, but it was really immersive, said that Dunkirk was pretty much the quintessential Dunkirk experience, not really, laying out like the historical details of how everything went, but really encapsulating the fear, the scenes, and the sights of what the last days at Dunkirk looked like for the British Expeditionary Forces and the remnants of the French army that were there. So those are fairly accurate movies, but I don't know about 12 Strong.
Also, another movie, like Jedi Sorcerer said, that's accurate. That movie, The Outpost, was very accurate. We actually knew one of the Army officers that was actually our JRTC commander that was there at that outpost before the entire situation went down. And he was there and left the area literally right as the new commander came in, and then they were ambushed from every side in that movie, The Outpost. I can't remember the name of the outpost. What was it? Keating? Was it Cop Keating?
Yeah, Cop Keating up there in Camdesh.
Yeah, Cop Keating got ambushed bad because it was in a really unstrategic spot over there, and they just got ambushed from every side, and it was a disaster, and a lot of guys got killed due to that bad decision making. But we actually know that guy, and he said it was accurate.
Yeah, he was involved in advising them on how to make the movie, but the cop or the fob. It was called a COP. I forgot what the COP abbreviation stood for, but the FOB is the Forward Operating Base. Was in the middle of nowhere with no access by road for the large part, and they dropped off our instructor in JROTC in this area and pretty much just told him to make do. He was the commander during the Battle of COP Keating, which was the second largest actual battle in Afghanistan during the entirety of the American occupation of Afghanistan. And what was really cool is that one day I asked him about it, and he actually went and got a PowerPoint that he made during a debriefing and showed me everything about the base, how it worked, where the battle actually happened, what happened. It was a very cool kind of a thing, but that is actually a very accurate movie as well, generally because the folks who made the movie talked to a lot of the commanding, well, not all of the commanding officers, because our instructor was the only one who actually survived his time as commander at the outpost. Every other commander actually ended up getting killed there, but they largely got it fairly accurate to the source material. So The Outpost is another highly accurate movie of what it was like for the American forces up in the Hindu Kush regions around Kamdesh. But still, I hope that addresses that fairly well. Once again, I can't really say a lot about 12 Strong because I don't know the exact story of 12 Strong enough to say if it's accurate or not. But maybe one day, years down the road, I finally will. But still, thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to GunFox61 once again, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, GunFox, for the second support of the night. He said December 7th, 1988, a 6.9 magnitude earthquake in Spatak, Armenia. December 2nd, 1988, STS-27 space shuttle Atlantis launches.
And thank you so much for the support. And Gunfox, I think that's really cool that we actually had a space shuttle called Atlantis. That is really neat when you think about it, because you wouldn't think they'd call it after a mythical city. Some people will say it's a real city. It's not. But it's really cool to think that they would. And I always found that name really neat. Atlantis, Endeavor, and also Discovery were the names of the space shuttles that were really cool to me. But still, thank you so much once again for supporting and sharing that. And also, that's wild to hear that a giant earthquake hit the Armenia-Azerbaijan area at that time as well. But still, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next one here goes to Duncan VR. And he comes in with a $16 donation. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that very generous support. He says, Muba, inshallah, you boys, you must know, Mao Zedong, Mao, are always the first with the news. Quack, inshallah, the real news. Enforcer, what sounds does inshallah Mickey make with a woof? Hot dog.
Where shall they go? Oh, a hot dog, inshallah. Well, he will took care of himself, but where will they go? The bush. Something like that, but still, I guess that's the best I could do. Thank you so much for the support, Duncan VR. And I gotta say, we love to see it. We love to see it. It's absolutely great to see Hot Dog Man going back down the tubes again. We love to see it. Somehow he actually kind of like keeps his subs a little bit, kind of when he's doing nothing. But when he finally starts uploading again, he loses subs. What do you know? Kind of weird like that, you know? Like, I don't know how that works, honestly, Matthew. Like, how in the world can he keep subs when he doesn't upload anything, but when he starts uploading stuff, he loses subscribers?
Because most of his subscribers are not active. They're dormant from a long time ago when he covered political stuff. So when they get reminded of his presence, they're like, oh gosh, I got to unsubscribe to that guy. Thank you for reminding me so much by uploading a video. And then they press unsubscribe. Ding, ding.
Man, dude, they're just sitting there on their phone and they hear bling and they're like, what is that? Oh, Yeah, yeah. And then they click on subscribe and then they just get right back off of the YouTube. They don't even stay. Man, that's got to be.
They opened one hot dog man video in a crowded place and they heard, oh man, and they closed it real quick and said, oh, that's it. I'm unsubscribing. That's it. I'm done.
Man, they sat there and they were like, oh, I wonder what this video is. I remember I subscribed to this channel like 5 years ago. And then they get on there and they're in a public place with the audio all the way up and they just hear, aw, man, aw. And then they have to mute it. I'm sorry. And then they're like saying they're on their own. That's not what it was. It was just a YouTube video. Okay, it's not what you think. And then they unsubscribe and they just never come back. They just never
Yo,
return.
Bill, what are you watching? I'm watching some guy called the Hot Dog Man. He literally says it in a thumbnail. Oh my God, can you imagine? Like, if you accidentally showed somebody that, open the clip and he's going, oh man, and then the thumbnail says, I am Hot Dog Man, and it's like pointing to him. That would be the most unfortunate scenario I've ever seen in my life.
Man, you know what's crazy with that, man? Like the move there was like a IQ 17 move. Like I don't even get what the point of that was, because you know what's crazy is that would be like, and I'm not making a political statement here, but this is the only one that came to mind. That would be like the governor of Florida coming out, you know, when he was getting like bashed at that time, and then like making a televised address to the state of Florida going, I'm Ron DeSanctimonious. It's like, you don't do that. Like, that's not a good move. Then people are just going to remember you for that, literally. It's like, that's not a great thing. And, like, I cannot believe that he actually made that video and was like, I'm the hot dog man. It's like, okay. It's like, I think many people already knew that. It's like, it's nothing new.
It's like, I am Satoshi Nakamoto. It's like, dude, you're not the Bitcoin creator or something like that. It's not like saying I'm the hot dog man. It's like unveiling a genius. It's like, oh, that's the loser they've been talking about. We get to know who it is finally.
But man, that delusional image of grandeur using AI to make himself look like a Chad for his thumbnails nowadays on like his gaming channel and stuff. Ugh. You know, that's got to run people away, man, because that's just see-through narcissism right there.
Yeah, basically so. But it only takes like 5 seconds of listening to realize, I think this guy might be a little crazy or something like that. That's why he's down to like 300 viewers a night.
He's down to a classroom of people. And he's sitting there, and then he'll say these grand statements on Twitter like, the world must know, and I'm going to continue to suffer for the world. Although there's like only like 20 people who actually care about what he says. Like, oh well. And some people will be like, why in the world do you keep talking about him? Because, you know, his channel, from what y'all say, is insignificant. Back in the day when the guy went after us and was harassing us to death, just to let y'all know, his channel was not that much smaller than we were. Like a couple of years ago when he was actually doxing us and people were harassing us just about every day and making our lives hell, quite literally. Like he was not that much smaller than us. He was maybe like about 60% of the size of our channel at the time. Now I think we're like 7 times the size of his channel or something like that. But someone like that who harasses you like that, they'll stick with you. And you know, and I believe in the statement, you know, don't hate people who hate you, otherwise you'll lose your soul. But the guy's annoying, and also I don't really have any good sentiments for the guy, considering how sick and deranged he is. So, you know, that's kind of why we continue to make fun of him, of the hot dog man, of course. But still, thank you so much for the support, Dunga VR, and helping this channel to keep on running. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Jenna, last name Tolls, that put in 2 more super chats, each a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Jenna, for the support. They said Putin's interest lost to a caravan of beater Toyotas. What a shame. And also, Syria is now ran by the Trailer Park Boys.
It's run by Bubbles. Like, that would be pretty funny. But I still thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I guess it is kind of run by the Trailer Park Boys. I would assume, maybe, you know, like that's not that far from the truth at this point. But still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and making it possible. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. We wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And we are greatly appreciative of folks like you. And so thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Emre Kappa, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much. We said Russia can't bring those supplies to the Black Sea. They can't pass the straits, according to the Montreux Convention.
And that is true, but they can bring it all the way from the North Sea, which is what we're talking about whenever we talk about them possibly resupplying, but that is an incredibly long supply route and would take a lot of time. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to PsycheBot, who puts in a 5 and says, huge thanks to Enforcer and Enforcer Matt for providing us with the best up-to-date news and a place where we can all come together, and long live the LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words. We try our best to be a very reliable news source, at least get on every day, and I hope that our assessments and information is pretty solid. A lot of people enjoy it, and I'm supposing that people have to really like it, because I think in total today, yeah, we've gained 2,000 subscribers today, which is pretty crazy. That's wild. Like, really, like,
That's good.
another 2,000 today. We went from 322,000 subscribers to 324, and we're only a few hundred away from 325,000. So if you're counting the big numbers, it's technically 3,000 from what everyone would see publicly, but behind the scenes, it's really more like 2.1 at this point. But loads of people have been enjoying our analysis and news, and it really is even wilder to see how much people appreciate it, because we never really did videos hardcore until this year. Like, we did them on and off, or they were really little tiny video projects up until this year, and then when we dropped out of law school, we went all in on making actual video analysis and putting it out on YouTube, and people have been loving it. Like, the channel was 156,000 subs at the beginning of this year, and it's now up to 325,000 nearly, which is a really huge jump from then. And what's even wilder is that, let me see here, let me see over the entire year how many subs there's been. Let me check. Let me see here. The entire year of 2024. So, to give you all the metrics, we've gotten 66 million views this year. We've had 13 million watch hours and 166,000 new subscribers to the channel in just this year. So in this 1 year alone, the channel has grown twice the size it has over the past 2 years combined. So
And also, that growth started after February because we really put like our heart and soul back into it after we quit law school. So January was probably pretty much a dead month for the channel, and then February and beyond has just been crazy.
yeah, it's been insane. And with this kind of growth, we actually are set, if we keep up this rate, to become one of the largest sources of news out there on YouTube, at least probably within the next maybe 2 years, which is, not that long, really. We've been doing this for 3 now, so 2 more years doesn't really seem that much of a long go. We could be well over 1 million. We could be close to 1 million or over 1 million if we keep up this growth rate up till that point. It's really just weird to think about that, like with how it's almost exponentially growing at this point. But I thank you so much for the kind words and support in this channel, because folks like you help to make it possible for us to pay our bills behind the scenes and keep doing this as a job, so that way the channel can keep growing and keep getting the news out there. And so a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Nemesis, who puts in a 5 and says, what about Romania, though?
Aw, man, Romania. I'm not going to make a comment on Romania. Matthew made a comment on Twitter about it today. I'm going to kind of make it short. Overturning an election result is undemocratic, no matter the explanation. That's a very undemocratic thing to do, and hearing what happened, I found that to be highly questionable, insanely questionable. You know what? I'll go into it a little bit, because it actually is something that I'm not really a big fan of. Saying that folks said some not so great things that were pro-Russian on TikTok to justify overthrowing an entire presidential election, and it's, well, pretty much throwing out an entire presidential election and its results, is undemocratic in my opinion. Because they didn't say that the voting systems in the country were rigged. They didn't say that there was any kind of ballot stuffing or any actual thing that directly dealt with the election that screwed it or really messed it up. It was that there was some propaganda out there on TikTok, so we're going to overthrow the election results. And there is propaganda out there all the time. So you could come up with that excuse every single time to throw out election results every single time. I would be honest with you on top of that, in the Western world, we believe in free speech. And while Russian propaganda is propaganda, it still largely falls under, especially if it's done by a citizen of a country like Romania or the United States, it is considered free speech. What Tucker Carlson Carlson is doing, I consider it to be un-American, but he still has a right to do it because he's an American and he has freedom of expression. So if he wants to peddle Russian propaganda all day, he can do it. But that still doesn't mean that when another election comes around, we go, oh, well, Tucker Carlson looks like he may be pro-Russian, and because of the kind of impact he's had on people, we're going to throw out the election results and just declare it null and void. That just seems undemocratic, and really very questionable to me. So that would be my comments on that, because some people have tried to justify it, but I never like the idea of saying in the attempt to preserve democracy, we are going to destroy democracy to save it. That makes no sense. You're literally doing exactly what you're saying these people wanted you to, which was destroying democracy to preserve it, which makes no sense. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you for the support, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on here to our next one, we have one from Point of Guinness, who puts in a 5, and thank you very much, Point of Guinness, for that support. They said it funds towards an Uber to send Carlson Tucker and Bashar al-Assad to the Putler, and Putler to the Hague.
And Tucker doesn't need to go to The Hague because he, just had an interview with someone. He didn't commit a crime. He just, had freedom of expression. We can disagree with it, but I'm not going to, say that he's got to be put in prison or anything like that. I think it's un-American, though. However, beyond that, I would agree with sending Assad. Assad, no doubt, has to go to The Hague. That guy literally is an undeniable war criminal by his own hands. Putin certainly needs to go as well. They'll probably never see justice, to be entirely honest, but I would hope that one day they would. But still, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ogre Online, who puts in a 5 once again. And thank you very much, Ogre Online, for the second support of the night. They said they're trying to get along because everyone is exhausted from fighting so long that now the worst faction is gone. It is enough to stop the bloodshed in the Middle East.
I think that's true. I think the war fatigue really set in, and because it's been 12 years, and that's probably why the two factions have agreed to a defensive pact. As long as they crush the Syrian Arab Republic, they do not care about what each other does beyond that. Although that might end up being a very fragile peace, and it may end up falling apart really quickly. We wouldn't know until the future, but I have a feeling that war fatigue has really set in, and that would be a pretty accurate assumption at the moment. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that addresses that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Siri, who puts in a 5 and says, shout out to the Enforcer Brothers and my Aunt Im and my neighbors from Syria. An inspiration from all corners of life and much love from Oslo, XO.
And I got to thank you so much once again for the support. And thank you for the kind words all the way from Oslo in Norway. And I got to thank you so much for enjoying this channel and throwing in some kind words, because if it wasn't for folks like you who have been around forever as an old guard, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, we ran a snap referendum real quick in the poll. It says, if it's determined that Russia meddled in Romania's elections, like they're saying, what was the best thing for Romania to do? 67% said nullify the election results and throw out the will of the voters. 14% said unsure. 12% said accept the results and do better next time. And 7% said it's nonsense to usurp elections. And honestly, here's my thoughts on the issue. The civilians in Romania were told, go out and vote and let your voice be heard. Pick the person you want to lead the country, and we will have to abide by that result. They went out and did that. And then after the fact, they said, actually, we think Russia meddled in the election. Let's just toss it out and nullify it. That is disrespectful to the citizens of Romania. I'm not even a citizen there, and that would irritate me if I lived there. I would say accept the results and do better next time. It's Romania's job to have good election security, and if they don't have that, that doesn't mean the citizens pay the price for it. That means that the voices still get to be heard, and next time, try better to secure your election. So, we can't fall down that slippery slope of starting to nullify results just because someone says someone messed with it. So somebody's always messing with elections, and we can't go into nullifying results just because someone might have done something somewhere. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that as well. I would have to be with the 12%, well, the 10% now, who said accept the results and do better next time. It's a little crazy to say, let's just throw out the results because we didn't like something. I mean, it wasn't even a valid concern. It was the Russians said something Well, the Russians may have said something on TikTok that may have swayed the election a little bit, so we're just going to throw it out. It was nothing like the actual election, like the vote counting was done wrongly, maybe because there was Russians infiltrating the vote counters or the stuffing ballots or something like that. There was none of that. There was none of that actually being alleged that would be serious enough to possibly, maybe call for a re-election or something along those lines. It was literally just the Russians may have said some anti-Western things on TikTok, so we're going to go and throw out the results. It doesn't even sound like anything serious enough to overturn a result for. That's literally like saying, Tucker Carlson went and talked to Lavrov. That's really starting to turn Americans sour. We need to just, nullify all the election results for the House and the presidency and just, wait 4 more years or something like that. Or maybe do an election in a year. That's crazy to me. Like, that is legitimately crazy. That's very undemocratic. That's not preserving democracy. That is only giving the semblance of democracy. Democracy is that your propaganda should be better than theirs. If you don't want them to hear Russian propaganda, come out with some better propaganda that beats theirs. It's a public forum. People can say stupid stuff and believe stupid things, but when it comes to elections and election integrity, you have to accept the results for what they are. Especially if people came up to their own conclusions on something, apparently listening to Russian propaganda or not, and then voted for someone. You can't go, I don't like that, so let's overturn it. That's literally just giving people really the facade that they have a choice, but they really do not have a choice because if they pick wrongly, then it's just thrown out and not considered. You know what it feels like? It almost feels like those elections that they would hold, Matthew, in high school, like the little mock elections. Because I remember like once or twice at our school, we had mock elections and someone got voted that the school administration didn't want. So they call everyone in the gym and go, y'all aren't taking this seriously, so we've just canceled the election. It's literally like that. It's like, you can't do that.
They did that?
Yeah, I remember they did that in my grade. I mean, we were voting for like the class representatives or whatever, and I think some people wrote in like Harambe because it was 2016 and Harambe got shot. So, they called us all into the gym and said, you know what? Y'all aren't taking this seriously. There were like 40 votes for Harambe. We're just canceling the election. We didn't have an election for class representatives that year.
Well, that's absurd. That was a dictatorship. I knew there was something wrong.
Yeah, I was like, that was not right to me. I was like, that's kind of stupid, just count the votes, and if Harambe isn't around because he's a gorilla from the Cincinnati Zoo that got shot, then just pick the next guy. It's like, that was goofy to me. But let's see. Also, I just saw someone say, people can be wrong. Well, then that means we could throw out your vote. Like, you're wrong. It's a subjective thing. That's what the thing is. Like, you say people can be wrong. Elections don't really matter if people are factually right or wrong. It's just considering what they want. Because when you're voting, it's your opinion on who's better. Like, there's not a qualitatively, undeniably better candidate than the other. Like, it was entirely subjective in the 2024 presidential election, and I know many people are going to act like it's not when I say this. Which candidate was better? That is entirely subjective to people's opinions. So the election doesn't go, well, this candidate is the right option, so if you vote for the other person, you're wrong. It's not an election at that point. You're literally living in North Korea at that point where it's like, listen, you vote for Kim Jong-un or the fall guy that we put up, and if you vote for the fall guy, we send you to the gulag. And that's literally what it is at that point. That's crazy. Like, you cannot do that. You have to just say, well, they all picked that guy, so he's the guy. Like, that's what happens. That's what an election is. You can't say people are wrong in an election. That completely, pretty much just devalidifies the entire election because you already have made the conclusion behind the scenes and no one voted on it. You just said that's what it is and that's what it will be, and people are going to have to accept that, and they better vote that way or they're about to figure out that they're not actually voting for anyone of their choice. They're just pretty much falling in line with what we want. And also, I saw someone say, you're talking about the deep state. No, that has nothing to do with the deep state. There's not some shadow government in the world that just screwed over Romania. The Romanians did that themselves. And the Romanian government did that themselves. And that's what's crazy about it. It makes you go, what the hell is that? Like, that's not democratic at all. Not that Romania has a, extremely, non-corrupt government. It's one of the more corrupt ones in NATO, but that still is what it is. Anyways, I hope that addresses that the best I can. Thank you for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, I saw one viewer here say this. They said, should voting be a human right? Here's my thing. was saying if it's a human right or not. A human right implies that it's just something that you're just naturally given and nobody can take it away from you. Voting will never be a human right because you always had to fight for your right to vote. Democracy is something that's not guaranteed. It's something you have to constantly fight for. And once people start getting complacent, that's when democracy starts slipping because the natural flow and natural order of things is to go toward dictatorship and total control because the people that typically rise to the top are typically people that like to control others, and that's typically when they take power and start doing things like Hitler, start doing things like Xi, start doing things like Kim Jong-un. So it's not ever going to be a human right. It sounds good on paper to say that, but it'll never work like that in reality. But Enforcer, would you like to add in?
I would say largely the same things, man. I just pretty much have to agree with that. There's nothing I could really add in. Also, yes, voting is not a right. Like just to cut
Human right, a human right.
yeah, human right. Like voting is something that is created as an institution. Like let me explain this really quickly. When people say things are rights, like a right to food, it's not like rights are supposed to be something that's inalienable to you as a human. Like you can utter noises out of your mouth, so it's a right that you can utter whatever sequence of noises you want out of your mouth to convey any kind of a topic. That is a right, is a freedom to speech. But a human right to vote, that's like saying there is a human right that there must be some sort of an external institution outside of your own body that allows you to be able to elect your representative. And then also it's like, if that is a right, what kind of voting system do we have? Do we have a parliamentary system, a federal republic system? What do we have? Do we have a direct democracy? Do we have a confederation? Like there's loads of different ways that you can vote for your representatives. That's entirely different on a base to base level. So are we saying that there is a specific way that a government must be elected that's a human right, or just in general, as long as you're able to put a name on some piece of paper and slip it into a box, then that qualifies? That's kind of the issue. Like that's like saying people have a right to food, like a human right to food. Who's giving you that food? Like that's not something that you just naturally, like you spontaneously cannot grow bread out of your fingernails as a human being. So where do you get that human right to have food? Like, yeah, I get it that, these would be great things for people to have, and it would be great to have them as maybe a legal right, maybe, or maybe not, depending on your opinion. But as far as it being an inalienable human right, they're not, because it's just not something that you can naturally do as a person. And that's kind of the thing. Like it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
It's like if somebody comes into power, and for example, let's say you have abundant food, whichever country you're living in, all of a sudden a dictator comes to power and says, "Okay, that's my food now." What's someone going to do like that believes that? They're going to say, "Wait a minute, that's my human right to food. You're not taking it." When they hold an AK to you and say, "No, that's actually my food now," your human right has disappeared. So there's no such thing as like quote unquote human rights, like per se, like something you're guaranteed. You're guaranteed nothing. Like unless you fight for it, unless you protect it, you're guaranteed nothing because people are vicious, generally speaking, and countries with ill intent and also leaders with ill intent, they eventually will end up taking your stuff if people as a whole don't say you can't do that. So that's why there's so much power in having people speak up and say things at the same time in unison in a democracy, and not just be quiet and just be in the corner thinking, "Oh, it'll all go fine," because you can't just be like that, or otherwise it might fall.
Also, I just saw someone go, "Yes, people have a right to food." Okay, here's the thing, though. Okay, hear me out, though. Hear me out. Human rights are something that if all of modern society was stripped away and you were a naked human being in the middle of the forest, those are the things you could do. So you have a right to make noises, which is speaking. So that's expression. You have a freedom of expression. That's really like the only one, because really like freedom of religion falls under freedom of expression. That's like the same thing. That's why it's included in the same thing in the First Amendment. You have a right to, and this is even open to interpretation, to defend yourself. But in some societies, they say that you don't really have a right to do that. Only the government has a right to prosecute people who attack you. You don't have an ability to defend yourself. But it's really like a questionable thing. Like, you don't have a human right to food because you don't naturally grow food out of your body to eat it. Like, sure, you can go and get food, but you don't have a right to say this other entity outside of me, like another person or the government, must give me food. That's not a right. That's forcing someone on someone else. So while you may have secured yourself a right, you've deprived someone else of another. That's much like a collective farming system in the Soviet Union, where they actually did say everyone has a right to food, and then they went and collectivized militarized the farms and sent the farmers out to the fields at gunpoint to go and grow food and harvest it for the rest of the country to eat. That's not really a right, because then you're having to pretty much subject others to slavery at that point for you to have a right to eat. So, that's not really a human right. Like, that sounds like really messed up when you say it like that, but when you understand it in the real sense of what are human rights and what isn't, that isn't a human right. Like having clean drinking water is not a human right. Like drinking water, obviously, you have to drink water to live, but saying that you have to have the proper amounts of fluoride, minerals, and also water filtration, then that must be a human right. That's kind of crazy, because it's like in the normal wild, if society was stripped away, where the hell are you getting all these minerals and also the refining abilities to make clean drinking water? Like, where are you getting that from? Like, yes, the government does provide that in America, and I would have to say that everything that the United States does, like making sure that there are welfare systems like food stamps to make sure people don't starve to death, and having clean drinking water out of the tap, are wonderful things and should be maintained. But saying that that is a human right for all is pretty crazy, because it takes an entire society and a lot of expense and expenditure outside of a person just being a natural human being to make those things possible. And that's also why you get a water bill at the end of the month, because clean drinking water, even then, is not a right. It is a privilege that you get when you pay your water bill. And also eating is a privilege you get when you go to work and you work to make some money, and then you go to the grocery store and buy some food. Those things are not rights. So I hope that addresses that fairly well, at least the best I can. But beyond that, anything where you're not directly working or paying to get that food, like for example, food stamps, that's government welfare. But that's welfare. That's something that's done for the benefit of society and of the republic. It's not something that is necessarily a right. It's not something that will just happen no matter what. Because if you sit on your ass, you're going to starve to death. So where does the right to food come from there? It doesn't. You have to go out and get food or make food or something along those lines. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Like here's one thing. You have a right to property. Like, I guess that would be an inalienable human right, is that you have a right to possessions. So if you go out and you kill a deer, someone can't just come and go, oh, that's mine now. Like, no, you freeloading asshole, go get your own deer. Don't eat mine. Like, this is my personal property. I got this food, and I'm going to eat it. And if I want you to have some because I'm nice, I will. But if I don't want you to, you have no right to eating my food. That's kind of how it will work for me, like in my opinion. So yes, a right to personal property. So if you have food that is your property, that's your property, and you have a right to it exclusively. But you don't have a right to someone else's food, or a right to just get food out of the ether or whatever. But anyways, I hope that does address that fairly well. But with that, we are on to the next one.
Excuse me. Oh, and our next one here, excuse me, got really choked up there. I was thinking about those human rights. I was getting choked up. But our next one here goes to Danny B, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you once again, Danny B, for that support. He said, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, with all y'all's knowledge of a lot of stuff, I would have never guessed y'all were in your 20s or so. And thank you very much, Danny. We are just in our 20s. I'm 24. The Enforcer is somewhere around, 22, 23?
22.
Which one is it? Which one? 22 years old.
I forget
so
sometimes.
We are in our early 20s. In fact, I just turned 24 a couple of months ago, so just barely 24. But thank you very much for the kind words. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the kind words as well. We usually get that a lot, or we then get, once people hear how young we are, you're too stupid to understand anything. But I thank you so much for appreciating us being out here and saying this kind of stuff on the channel, being so young, because not really a lot of people talk about stuff like that. So with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that addresses that well. And answer Melanie 16040's question before we move on. Melanie 16040 said, Enforcer, but you just spent many minutes saying food is not a right, so why do you get to keep the deer? Well, because you killed the deer in that hypothetical scenario. You're the one who went out and hunted for the deer, because once again, we're talking about rights on the most basic level. We're not talking about living in a post-industrial society like the United States. I'm talking about it's the 1700s, you're off in the Appalachian Mountains here in this country, and there's no one you can count on but yourself. So if you go out into the woods and you hunt and you kill that deer and you drag it back to your cabin, and you sit down for that nice meal, and then some asshole comes out of the woods who has not hunted, who has not done anything to go get that deer, and he comes up and he says, oh, that looks tasty, I got a right to it. You got a right to tell him, hell no, who the hell do you think you are? Like, that's personal property at that point. Like, that other guy does not have a right to a piece of your food. like at all. Like if you give them food, that's charity, and that's a gratuitous thing that should not be expected as a norm. But that's kind of the thing. That's why you have a right to keep that deer. You personally went out with your own bare hands and did the work to go get the deer and kill it to eat it. The other guy who was the freeloader who just wandered up does not have a right to go and eat that deer. If he's stupid enough to not be able to get himself food, he's going to starve to death, and that's on him. Like that sounds really cruel, but that's just how real life works. If we're outside of this in post-industrialized society that we live in, now that we're in a post-industrialized society, we can say things like, we expect for citizens in this country to be able to eat and to pull them out of poverty at least the best we can. So we'll give food stamps, we'll give government housing, because we do not want fellow citizens of the republic to be in such destitute conditions that they pretty much die from exposure or starvation. Like those are things that I would say I generally believe in. I don't think people ought to be starving to death in the streets and dying from exposure in this country, because we have more than plenty to be able to provide for those who are less fortunate in this nation. But on a basic human level, that could not be guaranteed, because if you say you have a right to housing, and let's say you're out on your own again, who in the world's building that house for you to live in that you have a right to? No one is. So you don't have a right to it because it doesn't exist without an entire society to uphold it or forcing other people to do it for you. So then it becomes less of an issue of, do I have a right to that? It becomes more so of, do I have a right to impose what I want on other people and force them to be deprived of their rights to give me something? And then that's the crux of the issue there. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, real quick to address the poll, it's a little mini poll right here, to ask the question, what is a human right? For example, the human right to food. So 49% said something you must fight for, 39% said something you are guaranteed, and 13% said unsure. And I'm definitely within the 49%. It is something you must fight for. And really calling it a human right is really not the right word for it. It would be more like a legal right, because societies create laws, and that's what gives you rights. As a human, you don't really have the right to anything. In fact, if it went down to its real basic necessities, humans would be acting like pretty much like animals and, fighting for scraps and killing each other on a regular basis. But luckily, we have society, and that's not the way it is on a daily basis. So it is something you must fight for. This country did not get here by simply just existing and coming into existence. It was fought for, people died for it, and people shed blood for it, and that goes for everything. So if you want to eat, if you want to get a car, you want to get a house, you got to fight for it, or luckily, since we're civilized, we're working for it. We're not fighting for it. So that's the way it is. I don't think we're really guaranteed anything. If we were guaranteed something, I think we'd be pretty much living in communism at that point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would agree. I feel like I beat that down into the ground a little bit earlier, and I want to see if I can address some comments from the chat, because a lot of people are bringing up good points. Like if you disagree with me, I'm not in a mortal situation of combat with you. It's an interesting point. And let's see. What if people from the future came back and were willing to work for a dime? That's an interesting question. I don't know, unfortunately, what that means exactly, but that does sound interesting if I knew the context. Let's see. And also, let's see. Plenty of politicians taking food off of our respective... Oh, that's kind of political. Let's see. I've learned a lot from just watching. Let's see. So human rights are might make rights. Well, let me see if I can explain this again, at least from how Matthew and me understand human rights, which is generally the way it was understood by the founding fathers of our republic. So it may be different from country to country because the context and historical background and culture is different. But here in this country, inalienable human rights were supposed to be rights that you had living among nature. There is no cities, there are no societies. It is just you and the wild, nothing else in between. So you do not have a right to a house, you do not have a right to water, you do not have a right to food, because there is no one else to provide that but yourself at that point. And then when we get into the idea of a modern society like this, you have a right to work, obviously. You have a right to work at a job. You do not have a right to food, but you have a right to work to then make something of value to then exchange for food. So then it's not necessarily a right to get food, it's a right to work to then have enough worth and value to society to then get the food. That's kind of how it works in our day and age. But back in the day, when we're saying we're living in nature, as far as the rights are concerned, You do not have a right to food because the food does not materialize in front of you. The food must be sought out by yourself and gotten by your own hands, by your own actions. Freedom of speech is something that you can naturally do without having to exert any effort. You do not have to go out and find speech or find words to speak of. You can make words by your own volition, like I am right now, like I am talking to y'all explaining this. And so you have a right to a freedom of expression. You can utter out any sequence of words or sentences or entire paragraphs that you want to, and no one's going to stop you from doing that because you can just do that naturally on your own. That's pretty much what an inalienable right is. A right to property. That was generally what was in the Declaration of Independence. Later on, it was changed to happiness. Happiness is a really stupid one because, like, how the hell do you have a right to happiness? Like, who gives you happiness? That's yourself. You have to go out and make your own happiness. But a right to property, you can have property. Like, if you went and picked some berries in the woods and you slipped it into a haversack, that is your property at that point. Those berries are yours. You pick those berries. If you went and built yourself a mud hut in the middle of those woods, that mud hut is yours. You built it with your own hands. That is your own labor. That is your own house. Things get a little bit more difficult when we talk about living in a post-industrial or just a society in general, or a post-industrial society like we're in, but those are basic rights. So you have a right to speech, you have a right to property, and really beyond that, you have a right to your own life, but your right, even then, especially in a society, you can be deprived of that right if you've conducted an atrocity that is considered to be so bad it's punishable by death. The government and the people, sanctioned through an act of the jury, could, well, not by the jury, but you could be found guilty by a jury and then sentenced to death by a judge. You could then be put to death and deprived of your right to life. But it gets really difficult, but I think the basic things that we can say are inalienable rights is a right to speech and a right to property. Those are the two things that you can guarantee just naturally do with really no effort at all. Because if you grab something and you want to keep it, that's your property at that point for large part. Not getting into the difficulties of like buying stuff at stores or anything like that and shoplifting and everything. If you can grab it like in the wild, if you picked up a twig and you just want to hold on to it, that's your property now. And if you can say words in any way you want, you have a freedom of expression. So those are two inalienable rights that I can come up with. But anything else, it kind of gets into the abstract of what society would say is inalienable and what is sacred, which is different from place to place. And there's really no way to guarantee things like food or clean drinking water or anything like that, unless if you live in a highly advanced society and are not in the elements of nature at that point where inalienable rights truly exist. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least on how I understand it, but many people are going to understand that different ways. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Iverson Tucker, who put in a 10, and thank you very much, Iverson, for that support. And he said here, the Second Amendment was intended as a check against the government, primarily. It's the ultimate check and balance, and that's why guns are the first things to go in a dictatorship.
And I thank you so much for the support. And that is actually a very interesting one. Let's see, the right to bear arms. I'm trying to find that super chat here. Where the hell is it, man? Like, I'm looking for it.
YouTube's been not putting them in the fan funding tab occasionally, but to read it again, he said the Second Amendment was intended as a check against the government, primarily, and it's the ultimate check and balance.
And I would agree with that to a point. A right to bear arms, which really is weapons in general, not just firearms, but really any weapons, is something that is very important, at least in the United States, because it largely ensures that the citizenry actually has the ability to defend itself from possible attempted tyranny by the government. That's largely what it was intended for in a way, but a lot of people take that overboard and act like that's the only thing. It was also intended for national defense as well, because if you read the Second Amendment, it says a well-regulated militia, and if you go back and read any of the other source material from the time, and don't act like people nowadays act like it's a real question. Like, there was actually a lot that was written about that at the time, like anything, and a lot of people were writing at the time that a well-regulated militia was just folks getting their own weapons and their own accoutrements and gear. So that way, if the state called upon them, their state that they lived in, like the state of New York, those citizens could then rally to form a militia to protect the state. That was what it kind of meant at the time, more so than, protect yourself against your own government from tyranny. Because the plan was, so many people don't understand this, like when they talk about the government and such things. The Declaration of Independence was saying that we will no longer be subjected to British tyranny because we have no elected representation in Parliament, and so therefore we break away from Britain to create a government where no such tyranny shall exist. That was what the Declaration of Independence really said. Like, people always say, they always read the Declaration of Independence to try and get it out of context, like, the Founding Fathers wanted us to overthrow the government they were going to make. Amen. Like, no, that's not like what it meant. It generally means we're going to create a government where these kinds of where this kind of tyranny doesn't exist, because everyone will have a right to elect their representatives and have representation in the government, so that way their wishes are the wishes that go forward. That's really what it meant. So I would still say, though, that is a fairly important right, like a right to petition, and if there was ever really you don't have a right to that, because even after the Constitutional Convention, even before the Constitutional Convention, the U.S. government was already putting down uprisings in the country. They didn't go, well, they have a right to overthrow the government, so I guess let it happen. Like, they actually would go down and put them down, like the Whiskey Rebellion and Shays Rebellion were two that happened right after the country was founded, before the Constitutional Convention even. I think one was right before. I think the Whiskey, no, I think Shays Rebellion was the one before the Constitutional Convention, and the Whiskey Rebellion was the one afterwards. But we put those down. Like, George Washington himself put down the Whiskey Rebellion by his own hands. He commanded the army that did it. That one, on that note, I don't really think that it's supposed to protect from tyranny, because the general idea of democracy, at least the federal republic we have, is that the system itself is supposed to protect from tyranny. And I don't think the government really reserves the citizens the right to overthrow the government that they live in. I mean, if people do that, they do that, but they take on the risks of being labeled traitors and punished and possibly executed later for that if they fail. But the government doesn't really hold an inherent right to allow people to rise up against it and destroy it, because that seems counterintuitive. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. But I do get where people are coming from with that, because in some other countries like Communist China and the Soviet Union, people holding on to their arms would have been a pretty valuable thing in the long run. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Straight Edge Soldier, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Straight Edge Soldier, for the support. Excuse me. And they said, I definitely agree with y'all on rights, but doesn't speaking a language require the existence of a culture and society? So if it's just at you, then you'd have to produce a language in order to express your thoughts.
That's an interesting concept. That's somewhat true. But then again, you could come up with your own language, in a sense, if you somehow wanted to. Like, we could just say woo-wah, and that could be water, and you could come up with a whole series of different ways that the language works and how you speak it. So I would generally say that that is an inalienable right, because no one can stop you from making noise. Like, at the basic level, languages do exist because of societies, but the ability for a human to vocalize noises, basic noises, is something that no one can stop you from doing. The fact that you grew up in a society and then figured out how to patternize those vocalizations into something that is coherent and understandable to other people is more so of just an odd coincidence, or kind of a nice coincidence or a convenience. But nevertheless, the right to it's not really a right to speech, it's more so a right to expression. And guttural noises could simply be expressions in itself. And no one can really stop you from making those noises. No one can ever really stop you unless they beat you to death and stop you from making noises at all. So generally, no one can take that away from you unless if they were to kill you, because you could always keep making noises until your last breath. So I see where that's coming from, though. That's a good point. I'll be honest with you, there really is no such thing as an inalienable right, to being entirely honest, because almost all of it is constructs of society and what we deem to be sacred things that should be rights. And I'm not talking about, like, because some people are misunderstanding what we're saying here. They're like, what do you mean people don't have a right to food? You want people to starve? No, we're talking about it on a philosophical level. Like, I'm not saying I actively want people to starve to death. That's crazy talk, and that's also very inhumane. But on an actual philosophical level, what is a right and what isn't? That's what we're talking about. And when you really do think about it, there really is just about nothing that is a right. That's kind of a weird thing to think about. So I guess you could say we're very lucky to live in the United States of America, where we all got together and figured out what actually are rights and generally how to protect them. And so with that, Thank you so much once again for support, and I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to GSMC, who puts in a 7 and says, how much does it cost to ask a proper question? This much? You asked the question right here. Guess what? You asked the question. Hey, thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you for the support. And you actually don't have to throw in a cent to have a question answered. You can just throw in a live chat, and it may get answered. But usually we have so many super chats that we not are really able to get to a lot of live chats usually. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one. Also, I'm seeing so many people, if I take your deer, you no longer have the right to it. Largely, yeah. I mean, like, it's all subjective, like that's the thing. And also another thing that Matthew's hitting on, because Matthew's having a debate with someone in the live chat, and it's actually a pretty interesting one. And Matthew was saying, yeah, you wouldn't really have any of those rights, though, if there wasn't a government there to enforce it. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Matthew, John Locke was the guy who came forward with the theory that pretty much people would exist in a state of chaos if it wasn't for a government to come forward and create some sort of a structured way that society functions.
Yes, you want to hear a little bit of political science BS. Honestly, it's not really BS, but it's kind of like a little bit abstract because it's John Locke's theory and stuff like that. But it was John Locke's social contract. That's what it was. And the social contract basically stated that people will give up some rights in exchange for protection and order. But, that kind of ties into what we're talking about, but kind of not at the same time. But one thing that Locke did believe, I'm trying to rack my brain here to make sure I'm getting this proper. I think Locke believed that people do have natural rights, meaning rights that are not just granted by a government, but actually granted by just nature. And it was like some of these things that people were talking about in the live chat, like the right to liberty, the right to some property, and things like that. So that's the part right there that I think some people in the live chat are saying. I would disagree with Locke on that one, and I disagreed in college when we were discussing that as well, and I wrote a paper disagreeing on it. But yeah, you're generally correct.
Yeah, and that's sort of the thing with that, is that the rights we have only exist because we live in the United States of America. And rights are very different depending on where you go in the world. For example, in China, you really do not have a right to freedom of expression. And you really don't have a right to vote unless you're a member of the Communist Party. In America, every citizen that is a citizen of the United States that is not a felon has the eligibility to vote, and can vote if they choose. You have the right to freedom of expression of any kind. And some people are trying to, split hairs there. No, whether you like it or not, whether it's extremely offensive or not, everyone has a right to say whatever the hell they want. There is no limitations to that. Whether society likes it or not and is going to punish them over it, that's another thing. But the government does not have the right to come down no matter what you say and put you in prison over something that you have uttered out of your mouth. That is a human right that you have, whether people like what's coming out of folks' mouths or not. There is a load of rights that the United States has secured, but at the same time, there are also things that the government imposes on people. It's a double-edged sword. For example, everyone in this nation must pay taxes. If you have some sort of income, you must pay taxes on that income. That is a guarantee for everyone. So you are compelled, you actually have to legally pay taxes. There is actual criminal punishments if you continue to avoid paying taxes. That's tax evasion. But at the same time, while you pay taxes and give up some of your, I guess, liberties to property, because money is property after all, although it is a social construct, you do get much out of it. The government creates a sense of order and lays out the actual rights that you have that are pretty much protected in this country in most instances. So I would say I would largely agree with what John Locke said, because when you really do think about it, you do give up some of your liberties and rights, like, for example, having to pay taxes regardless, to then have an exchange of order. And that order comes through the carrying out and the execution of protections of rights, and also the largely the carrying on of society.
Yes, I would say so. That's definitely part of it.
I would say so. We are really starting to run later on. Like, we were supposed to round this thing out a little bit earlier tonight, but we've been having an interesting time, and I see that a lot of people are really interested in this kind of a discussion here. It's a very interesting one. It really goes to the core of just basic philosophy, honestly, on government and rights. But still, I hope that does address that the best I can. Also, someone said IRS is asshole. No, don't say that. They'll audit you. I'm just kidding. I'm playing with you. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Iverson Tucker yet again, who puts in a 7 and says, a well-regulated militia to protect a free state. And I love the discourse on this channel. And LLT LSA and look up eggnog mutiny.
And the eggnog mutiny. That sounds interesting. Let me go see what this is. The eggnog riot, sometimes known as a grog mutiny, was a riot that took place at West Point in 1826. It was caused by a drunken Christmas party in the North Barracks of the Academy. Man, the Army never changes. 2 days prior to the incident, a large quantity of whiskey was smuggled into the Academy to make eggnog for the party, giving the riot its name. Dang. Dude, good lord. Oh my lord, you wouldn't believe who was involved in the riot. The future president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis.
No way.
No, I'm not even kidding. He's actually here. Though he was not court-martialed, he was one of the participants in the riot.
Damn.
That is crazy. That is so freaking crazy right there. That is nuts. I've never even heard of this before. I usually don't know a lot about the military academy's history, histories in America, except for like the basic overlay of when they were founded and some of the people who may have gone to them and been alumni. But this is a very wild story. And I thank you for the support and also throwing in some interesting stuff about your opinions on what rights are and what they're not. But still, thank you so much once again. And also, someone also said something, man, the GSMC said the right to something. And I was like, hell no. Like, you see, if you do that without the other person's consent, that is actually a serious felony in this country. So no, you do not have a right to that at all. Not a single bit. I think the Netherlands actually does say that you have a right to that certain thing. Would you believe that, man? Yes. Like, they actually,
the law?
let's see. Let me see if I can pull it up. No, right. Let me see here. Let's see. Hang on, I'm trying to make sure. Oh, yeah, here we go. So, I can't click on any of the articles, because there may be questionable things on them, but it is actually they consider it a right. So there's actually a pension that you were given if you were disabled in the country, to be able to visit, working women and go and, acquire their services.
What in the actual hell?
It's a little weird.
Is this serious or is this a joke?
No, this is serious. This is an actual legal right, human right, according to the Dutch.
Okay, so the Dutch. So I'm trying to think. This is the country with the red light district, right? Like
Yeah,
the real
in
like
Amsterdam.
open prostitution thing. It's legalized and all that stuff.
Yes.
That's interesting. So the government gives you a stipend to head to the red light district.
Well, not everyone. It's considered a right. So if you're an able-bodied person who could easily go out and, there's really no way to go about this without just saying the stuff without like beating around the bush. If you're just a normal person that can go out and get laid, they're not going to give you a pension. But if you're someone who is disabled to the point that you really can't do that easily or really at all, then the government says it's a human right. Everyone has to get laid eventually. So we're going to give you a pension so that you can go and get laid. Once a month, by the way.
Once a month?
Yeah, once a month.
Huh. I'm not really sure what to say about that. I mean, it's insanity, I think. But I'm not really sure what else to say about it. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it?
I'll be honest with you. I really don't know what to make of that one. That one's a little wild to me. Because it's like, if there was no one else left alive on the world, who's guaranteeing that right, Like, but then again, that gets into the whole deep thing that we were talking about, and there really is no such thing as right at all, honestly, even in the wild, So, like, I just find that a little bit bizarre, though, Like, I don't know. Like, me personally, I find something wrong with that, because it's like, if there isn't any working women around, do you just force yourself upon someone else to ensure you're right? That's depriving them of their rights, but also gratifying your own rights, and it's like, there's a massive issue there. Like, at least to me personally, I find a big issue there, because unless if there is a working woman, I'm trying to say this in the most adult way I can, unless there's a working woman, there is no way to secure that right, unless you were to deprive someone else of their rights to get it, and that seems to me like it's not really a right. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least in my opinion, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on from that interesting rabbit hole, onto our next question here. This one goes to Emre Kappa, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Emre, for the support. They said Turkey to Russia first, Karabakh, now Syria.
And yes, that is entirely true. And hopefully we'll see that the Russians finally get what's coming to them too, kind of like the Assad regime is right now. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Ogre Online once again, who puts in a 5 and says Russia likely has been scaling back support for a while, and any large weapons they gave to Assad are probably losses at this point and captured for sure.
Oh, that's certainly true from what we've seen. The Syrian Arab army has almost nothing, and the Russians have provided them with very little, including in the realm of training for the large part. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Ogre Online, who puts in a 5 once again, and thank you very much. He said, also, Russia cannot protect its own borders, is why I say what I say about ICBMs, and if they won't use them now, they will never use them.
And I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel keep running. I suppose that's true in a sense, I would suppose. So with that, thank you once again for support. And also, let's see, hang on. I just saw someone said, I don't know what this means, Matthew, but someone said, what a shit, the whole mindset is wrong. You have a right to choose your partner and say no, but you do not have a right to that.
They're agreeing with you.
Okay, okay, good, because I was sitting there, I was confused. I was like, I don't know what that means. But yeah, like, you don't have a right to that. You know, it's like, you know, if you said, oh, yep, it's that time of the month, because you're guaranteed this once a month, technically, according to what they're saying in the Netherlands. It's that time of the month. Anyone around I can pay for this? No? Hey, look, there's that lady over there. I'm just going to go over there and get this done with because it's that time of the month. It's like, that's a crime. Like, it's like you don't have a right to that. Like it's depriving someone else of their right. That's just, to me, that's wild. Like, I just don't think I'd ever agree with that one. Of course, I'm going to say this because some people may get into the domestic political thing in America. I'm not saying whether working women are right or wrong or not. I'm not going to get into that one because, interestingly enough, that actually is a domestic political discussion depending on where you are in America. But one thing I will say is that you sure as hell don't have a right to it. That makes no sense at all. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. Oh, hello.
Oh, and our next one here, while the lag hits really hard, and this one goes to Plazoth, who puts in a 5 and says, Coffee Fund, LSA.
And hey, thank you so much for the support to the Coffee Fund and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if you were, I got to thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running and supporting it. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep drinking coffee. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Kachulian343, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Kachulian, for that support. They said, Russia should be shaking in their boots. Historically, when the Canadians stop saying sorry, we get new articles in the Geneva Convention.
And I gotta thank you so much for supporting. That's true. Usually new articles in the Geneva Convention are made based off of the new experiences of war. So eventually we'll probably see that some forms of drone warfare are war crimes that we're seeing right now. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Bruce Lee, who puts in a 5. It says, Hot Dog Man in the ER. I suppose that's a result of playing 2 hot dogs and something. I feel like this might be bad.
It sounds bad. It sounds pretty bad. I'm not gonna lie, but I thank you for the support. Maybe. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Nightmare Before Xmas, who puts in a 5 and says, how much longer do you think pro-Russian shills will get their blood money? Looks like the coffers are going to run dry soon, LSA.
And it looks like it's probably not going to last that much longer, to be entirely honest. But I do thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one. Also, I'm seeing a lot of people saying things like, well, the working woman can just refuse. Well, no, I mean, they all can't refuse because then you don't have a right to it anymore and they're depriving you of your right, you see, because if you have if there's only 5 working women in that whole country and the government says you have a right every single month to get laid, and then you go up to all 5 of these working women and they all tell you, no, I'm not going to lay you, then what do you do? Do you go through the courts and say they won't lay me, therefore I want a court order where they must be forced to perform a sexual act with me? Like that,
Man, they're going to litigate this one.
yeah, they're going to litigate getting laid. Like at that point, because like you're saying they can just refuse. They cannot though, because if every single one of them refuses, then he's being denied his right at a basic level to get laid. So so then what does the court do? Does the court file a court order saying this specific working woman must lay this man? Like she has no choice. He must get laid by her specifically. Like that's kind of territory that you're entering at that point, because then you're depriving that woman of her right to her own body for the large part, for the benefits of allowing someone else to have a right, which is not a right at that point. So that's what I've got to say about that right there, because it sounds so simple when you just say, well, they can just say no, or they choose to be a working woman. But at the same time, though, if you're saying they have a right to that, that means that all of them can't refuse. Someone's got to take the bullet, pretty much. They got to bite the bullet. And it's like, then that person is apparently not having a choice or a right. They're just forced into it. That doesn't really sound that great to me. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Leora Abigail, once again, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Leora, for the support. She said, Hot Dog Man joins Free Russian Army because he gave up on getting some... oh no.
That one sounds bad.
Oh, man, he's going to litigate over this one.
And I think you're the support, and sounds like that one's going to litigation right there, straight to the courts. But with that,
oh man, got to move to what's the country? Dutch. Got to move to
the Netherlands.
Netherlands. Got to move to the
Man.
Netherlands quickly.
I got to tell you, that sounds like a wild one. I don't even know what it is, but it sounded wild. But still, thank you for support. I hope that has addressed it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one here goes to Mulder Channel, who puts in a 5. It says LSA, long-lasting LSA.
And long live the LSA, the long-lasting LSA. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Danny B yet again, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Danny, for the support once again.
Hey.
He said, I know it's late and y'all got to go, but I just wanted to ask, if I started a YouTube live with Chef Danny for my new catering, would y'all watch? I would watch that, Danny, and that would actually be very popular. You should start that, because I've seen other channels doing that. That seems to be like a new category in YouTube. Make them specifically short videos on YouTube, like the shorts where you can flick through them and see them really quickly. That would actually be very big. Like, you should actually do that. That's a good idea. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that would be really cool. I would personally watch it. I watch cooking stuff here and there, so I would certainly watch it. And I got to thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are moving on into the next one. But really quickly, I see so many people still talking about this. I want to say this again. Someone said, but there are thousands of working women in the Netherlands. Somebody will provide. That's assuming that they do. If they don't, then that person's been deprived of their right. You see, you're trying to find a caveat to this. We're talking about this at its most basic level. If there is one working woman in the Netherlands, we're not working off of, oh, there's thousands of them. Someone will say, sure. No. If all of them said no, this person's being denied their right. So does the Dutch government have the authority to tell one of these working women that they must deprive themselves of their own carnal knowledge for this person to have their right to get laid? That's what it ends up coming down to. Like, I know a lot of people are trying to find caveats and make it seem like that's great or acceptable, but that is a serious question to ask right there, because that's much like something else that used to happen in the United States that someone brought up, is that sometimes back in the day, in some states in the United States, when a woman got married to a man, beyond that point, it was not her choice, actually, whether that man had a great day, if y'all see what I'm saying, or not. Very many states have just made that legal over the past few, made that illegal over just the past few decades. No one has a right to that. That is a serious crime right there. Like, in my opinion, that is a serious crime. No one has a right to that at all. Like, if you're married, if you're not married, if you're disabled, no one has a right to that. Like, that's crazy, because at the basic level, if someone refuses and they're the only person around that can actually fulfill that right, they must be deprived of their right for that other person's right to be fulfilled. That is not at all a right. That is something that is very abhorrent to me, because you have to naturally deprive someone else of their right to fulfill it for the other person.
And also, you don't need that to live. Like, I know some people are gonna make jokes about that, but you don't need that to live. Like, you obviously need food, water, and shelter to live, but you don't need the other thing to live. Like, you're not going to die without that. So, and trying to act like that's something that people need or have to have is a bit silly. That seems like something that maybe someone was thinking, oh, that might be good for me or something like that. Let's just pass that as a law. So, I don't know. To me, I don't like it.
Yeah, here's the thing. Like, I want to put this out there, okay? Like, because this is the mindset that worked in America for a long time up until recently. So, if y'all don't know this, adultery technically on the books in most places in America is illegal. That's actually a crime. It's just that it's not really enforced these days. But in Alabama, in the state of Alabama, it is actually illegal to commit adultery, which is cheating on your spouse. So that means that you cannot go find a working girl, and that does not mean that you have a right to getting laid. So the only person that can lay you is your wife. And up until about the 80s, it was actually the books in Alabama that if your husband forced himself upon you to get himself laid, he actually had a right to do that because you were the only person who could lay him at that point. And that was abhorrent when you think about that. Like, it's not even really a laughing matter, because someone had to be defiled for that right to be fulfilled. That is a very questionable thing, and that's almost the same thing that's going on in the Netherlands in a different way, in my opinion. And if everyone said no, who's going to be forced to bite the bullet? That person doesn't have any rights at that point. They're being deprived of them, and that is morally reprehensible, in my opinion. And I see a lot of people saying, you don't know working girls, they'll do anything. Like, that's not the argument here. Like, I see some really silly arguments being brought up for this. That's not the argument here about people will do anything for money. Like, if they don't want to do it, who's going to be forced to do it? That's the messed up part about it. Like, that's not right. Like, it's just basically not right, in my opinion. And also someone said, oh, Alabama. No, that was actually the law in most states, about 30 or so of them, for a good long while, up until about the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then finally those states started to get rid of those laws. But that kind of stuff is questionable. It's the same thing as slavery or something else, compelling people to do things they shouldn't have to do because the government says that it's fine. Like, those things are not great, and it should be curtailed as much as possible. And so with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Ed, who puts in a 5 and says, Irish Ed here, and question, did you hear that an illegal individual was caught sending North Korea a container ship full of ammo, guns, tech, and South Korean uniforms?
I did hear that. It apparently was an American, actually. I believe out of California or someplace like that. But he was arrested by the federal government, and he's innocent until proven guilty. But still, it sounds as though it might be an open and shut case from what I heard. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to CD, who puts in the 5. And thank you very much, CD, for that $5 support. I do not see a comment attached to it, but nonetheless, thank you very much for supporting the channel. And we also have a 5 from the new IKB4472, who says, tell us how much of a screw-up that Penn Central Station was.
Oh, it was bad. So, like, just to put it out there shortly, New York Central System and Pennsylvania Railroad are the most famous railroads in the United States of America because they were so unique. Pennsylvania Railroad was known as the standard railroad around the world because they came up with their own rules and regulations on how they ran their railroads and also how they ran on a corporate level, which is very bad for a merger. So in the 1960s, both of the companies were going under because generally rail transportation in the East Coast during that time was doing poorly. So they decided that the smart thing to do, considering that their railroad territories were almost in the same place, was to merge into one company. So Pennsylvania Railroad and New York Central merged into Penn Central. And Penn Central ran into massive problems because the two companies had been rivals their entire history. Pennsylvania Railroad's corporate system, as well as its railroad system, functioned entirely different than New York Central, which caused natural conflicts inside of the company's management structure. And it led to both sides sabotaging the company to get back at each other to the point that they literally ran the company into the ground pretty much deliberately on both ends unknowingly and imploded the company. It was the biggest bankruptcy in America at the time that it filed filed for bankruptcy. I believe until the economic recession of 2008, it was the biggest one. And it is so weird when like you think about that, because it's like looking at that just from the operational perspective, it's like those are the two companies that should have never merged. Pennsylvania Railroad, New York Central. They like Pennsylvania Railroad could literally never merge with anyone without having to be the dominant pretty much company that transcribed all of its stuff onto the other one it merged with. And then New York Central sure as hell wasn't going to be taking that because they had been the rival of Pennsylvania, Pennsy is what we're going to call it, for literally like a century. It's like, it's just, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have worked, and it didn't work. And that's why it was such a goofy, stupid thing. And I don't know why they didn't see that when they were merging, but they sure as hell found out when it went bankrupt. But still, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Victor Navorsky, who puts in the 5. And thank you very much, Victor, for the support. He said, Enforcers, the movie 12 Strong leaves out the Battle of Kali-i-Janghai, fight with Taliban near Mazar-e-Sharif, and Johnny Span, CIA, first U.S. war death.
And thank you for the support, and thank you for sharing that. And I will try and look into that movie and get some more information and details on it. But still, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Iverson Tucker, who puts in a 5 and says, freedom is a verb. You have to fight for it, like your rights. LLT, LSA.
And I thank you for the support. And that's one way of looking at it, a pretty interesting way. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Ryan H., who puts in a 5 and says, with the amount of cameras and heavy surveillance in New York City, how was the shooter who targeted the United Healthcare CEO not apprehended yet? That's a good question, Ryan. That's a good question. I'm seeing those pictures floating around of a guy that looks somewhat similar to him in a hotel lobby, but his backpack doesn't match. Also, his jacket's not the same, and he looks a little bit different with the facial features. So I'm not sure if that's the guy, but it sounds like the FBI just put out a help wanted poster, and they need help finding the guy, and they're offering a $50,000 reward because they really don't know where he went, where he's at, or anything. But they did find his backpack in Central Park, they say, but that's about it. Also, they said he might have gotten onto a bus and headed down to Atlanta. That's their current leads at the moment, but that's not much to go on. So very, very interesting. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have to say, I actually do not know how that happened. I would have to say the guy's pretty slippery. I'll say that, because for him to get all the way out of New York City in the first place is a pretty wild thing in itself. Because there's a lot of cops in the NYPD. Well, there's a lot of cops in New York City, and the NYPD is it's all over the place in New York City. So it's a little wild that he made it out. And I just have to say, I guess the guy's either really slippery or there was a failure in the police department. One or the other. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, like another thing I've seen people saying here, they said, oh, he might have been a trained assassin. He definitely knew what he was doing, that's for sure. He had a silencer on the pistol. His pistol appeared to be probably a semi-automatic, but he kept having to rack the slide on every single shot he took. I assume maybe it's because the gases were not allowing the gun to cycle properly, because sometimes suppressors will do that. But he seemed to know exactly what he was doing. He knew where he was aiming, and he did it in very cold blood, like no reaction whatsoever when he was doing the shooting. So that guy appeared to be maybe someone who maybe wasn't their first time doing something like that. I'm not really for certain about that. But the fact he was able to evade all the New York City CCTV cameras and everything else indicates that he had a plan and he kind of knew the system and how it worked. So it might have been a professional hit. But anyways, moving on here to our next one. This one goes to Straight Edge Soldier, who puts in a 5. It says, is there any word on who the Druze people will side with in Syria? Also, Marmot time, I want some plum.
Hey, and also we understand that they're kind of aligning with the SDF right now. That's why their front line is highlighted in orange at the moment, much like the SDF's itself. But let's get some Marmot really quickly. Just a little bit of Marmot, because we are starting to run overtime, actually, crazily enough. We were actually planning on getting off around 12 tonight, but we've already gone about 48 minutes overtime. But, oh, hello there. Oh!
Hey, hello
It's
there.
the Marmot.
Hey. Good sir. Coughing up blood.
Aw, man, I just got out of the ER from being a non-addicted smoker of the grass. Aw, man, help me get my chair and my elevated desk. Aw, man.
Oh man, I've only raised 265 and I had to cut out the DC trip because I couldn't raise enough for that, so I'm just gonna have to settle on grifting for the chair. For real.
Aw. Yeah, yeah. It's like rip bozo. But still, thank you so much for the support. I hope you enjoyed the marmot. We love the marmot, Alan the marmot, and thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to you, Lior Avigile, once again, who puts in the 5 and says, how old is this Dutch law about prostitution? Is it more outdated because of the critical thinking perspective?
Let's see here. Well, from what I was reading, some of the things were fairly recent. Let's see. Largest and best known. Let's see here. I'm trying to see if I can find some information. I'm not showing this on screen, by the way, because some of it, a lot of it actually is very, very questionable. It's incredibly questionable. Let's see. So it was suppressed in the 16th century only, and then from beyond that, it was largely just allowed. Let's see. Actually, no, it's actually been a little bit of a contentious thing because it was outlawed in the 16th century, the 19th century, and then it was legalized towards the later end of the 20th century. And let's see here. Hang on, I'm trying to see if I can find the part about the laws. Also, by the way, I just want to put this out there. For this to be an inalienable human right in the Netherlands, it's very interesting that the Wikipedia segment has an entire, like, essay dedicated to how it was literally banned during the Wuhan whirlybird for about a year and a half. So for it to be an inalienable human right, it's very interesting to see it could just disappear for a year and a half with no impact. So just putting that out there. But let's see here. Let's see. So in practice, dang, man. It's hard to find any real info on how long that's been the case that they've considered it to be a human right. Let's see. Dutch law let's see. Human right. So let's see if we can find that. Correct. So just to let you know, I'm gonna have to. I'm not gonna lie. I think the Netherlands is a little bit backwards because it is just this year finally saying that getting laid without consent is a form of a crime. So. And someone said, stop demonizing. Look, y'all, I'm going to have to say this. I think the Netherlands is pretty backwards because considering that the United States has said that that form of assault is a crime for pretty much the entirety of the nation's history, and the Netherlands is finally, from what I'm reading, just doing that this year, that seems a little bit backwards to me. The Netherlands is a great place, but that aspect of it, that's very questionable. But with that, I hope that addresses that well. Thank you once again for supporting and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Caviar, who puts in a 2 and says, where do rebels get intel on the Assad forces?
They don't. They just advance and hope that they find them and get them. Like, that's literally all they've been doing the entire time, at least from what we know. And also 420 it said getting laid without consent is something. I can't say the word on air, but yes, that's true. But the Netherlands did not realize that until just this year, from what I was reading. They finally just said that that is a crime and that specific crime. So, you know, with that whole, you know, this is a human right kind of a thing, it appears that up until very recently, that was actually the case, that that could just be forced upon one of them, whether they wanted it or not. So with that, hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Leora Avigile once again, who puts in the 2 and says, Hot Dog Man goes to Bakhmut, LMFAO.
Aw, man, he wouldn't do that because that would be too dangerous. He'd rather stay 30 miles behind the lines and shoot an RPG. Aw, man. But still, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I see that Activista was talking about that hit that happened on that United Healthcare CEO, by the way. I was saying to someone in the live chat, I think I was saying to Melanie in the live chat, I said, the guy must have known what he was up to or something like that, the shooter, because he did it literally in the middle of the sidewalk in broad daylight, and it looked like he wanted it to be seen. Obviously, he didn't want to be caught, but he wanted the hit to be seen, and that's why he did it in broad daylight, because otherwise, it seems like if the guy was trying to go for covert, he would have probably gone maybe around nighttime or something like that, or found the guy somewhere else, not in the middle of, crowded New York City. But, he did it for a purpose, and he wrote stuff on the shells, the bullet casings as well. I can't remember what 3 words were on there. It was like depose, something else, diffuse, or something like that. Enforcer, do you remember what words were on the shells?
It was depose, deny, and something else.
Yeah, it was like some type of deal like involving whistleblowers working at companies and what they do to silence whistleblowers, something like that, sort of like a phrase along those lines. And I think the guy, if I had to take a stab at it, he might be a disgruntled employee, maybe a disgruntled ex-employee, or he was someone who had a claim denied by United Healthcare and maybe a loved one died as a result of it or something like that. Something's really, really serious. Or it could be maybe someone hired him to go out there and go get this guy. It could be another part of it because there were some investor meetings coming up that were pretty crucial. So also some controversy going on in the background as well with that CEO. But I don't know. Well, maybe we'll find out soon. But our next one here goes to Philip Fix's LSA, who puts in a 2 and says, I support the right to arm bears. Rawr.
That's a good one. I've said that one before too, back in school. That was a pretty funny one. But still, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And that is our final Super Chat of the night. So we are jumping very quickly into our live chats here because we are so far over time.
Yeah, we
it's
are.
a marathon. Our Morse code coach tonight were Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J. Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. They said the Morse code for tonight reads, you better lock up your doors today because Al-Assad is on his way to 4 seasons. LLT, LSA.
And that's the sound of money. Y'all got that down on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I got to congratulate y'all for getting that correct on the 1017th day of the war because y'all continue to get that right time and time again. But of course, due to time constraints tonight, we will only be able to get 3 live chat questions because this stream is nearly 4 hours long. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to Angel Hernandez, who says, have you seen the interview on CNN that they did with the rebel forces guy inside of Syria? And if you saw it, what is your reaction to it?
I saw it. Very interesting interview. One thing I did note, however, is that a lot of people are saying that that specific faction is bringing liberty, but I noticed that interviewer had to specifically wear, I believe it was a hijab, so that way she wouldn't end up being punished for not aligning with their religious customs, which is showing that there is an oppressive element involved with that government, at least at that point. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from my takes, at least very quick takes. But with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Kenneth Lovchi from the live chat. He said, I have a serious question. Who has control of Assad's chemical weapons?
Well, actually, the Israelis bombed those today, so it appears that no one has control of them because they actually ended up mostly being destroyed. But if anyone would have a control over them, it probably would be the Assad regime still, but there's not a lot of them left. And so I hope that addresses that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one is going to go to Specialist G, who says, does the USA still have soldiers in Syria?
Yes, we do. We have them in a couple of small garrisons, and we also have them at the At-Tanf garrison, which is one of our largest ones in the area, and actually creates a U.S. occupational zone within that area of Syria, which has been used for years to provide safe harbor to the Free Syrian Army, which largely has existed under our protection for quite some time. But I hope that addresses that question incredibly well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank everyone so much once again for watching. At the peak tonight, there was 10.5 thousand people here, and about 77.5 thousand people have watched this stream from beginning to end. We are entirely honored and greatly appreciative to have all of y'all here, and we thank y'all massively once again for watching this channel and really enjoying it tonight. Also, a big thanks to Bruce Lee for throwing in $1.50 and a hot dog. A big thanks to you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. But with that, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraine. Oh, and a big thanks to Trissom, who threw in their first Super Chat ever, although I believe you threw in one last night.
They threw in one last night.
Yeah. YouTube's lying to us, but nevertheless, a big shout out to Trissom 666 who threw in a $25 donation and said thank you and good night. And a big thanks to you and a good night to you as well, Trissom, along with the rest of the LSA. And we will see you all tomorrow. But good night, take care, and long live the LSA, and the LSA will never die.
And with that, folks, good night to you all. And also, shout out to Bruce Lee for putting into 2, and also Philip Fix's LSA for also putting into 2 as well. And we appreciate the both of you for that support. And also, in the meantime, folks, thank you all once again for another great stream. We'll see you all tomorrow midday for the short war video. Tomorrow's my day, so if there's enough news to cover, you'll be hearing from me midday on the short war video. And obviously, you'll hear from us both tomorrow night on the next war news stream at 10 p.m. Eastern. But with that, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.
честь.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.